Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. Excellent. Okay. Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. My name is Jamal Thomas. I am going to be the voice that is going to be in your ear from 7 to 10 a.m., Monday through Friday. Just Monday through Friday. I'm going forward. Um, Look, man, I want to thank everyone that got me on for this show. And not for this show, I just mean the radio gig, whether it's Garland, whether it's Vindia, they will have my eternal appreciation. Doing Fault Lines was an honor of my life. I'm dressed in a suit today because yesterday when I did the first show, I hated that first show. It had nothing to do with the people, it had everything to do with the technology. This time, I wanted to make sure that I got it right. And it sounds like you guys can hear me fine. It sounds like the echo has gone down. The technology is working correctly. Even the interview software is set up correctly. So we are ready to do the news. If you guys want to support this work, give it a like, give it a share. At the end of the hour, I'm going to do my best to read super chats that are provided for the show. You can support this channel through PayPal or, for that matter, Patreon. And let's do the news. Let's get to it. So, I have been enamored by this election. I'm going to have some really good guests today. Starting off, I'm going to have Efshan. He lives in Iran, and he's going to give me this kind of feeling on the ground, what's taking place on the ground in Iran. At 8, we're going to have Scott Ritter. Scott Ritter is going to give a military assessment of any kind of war that's going to pop off between Israel and Iran. Look, Israel is chest thumping, and they seem to think murdering a lot of civilians is somehow the same thing as accomplishing military objectives. From my point of view, they're strategically defeated. I don't necessarily know how they suppose to be the country of 90 million people when they are a country of 8 million people and a country that is bleeding economically, is vulnerable for the first time since I have known Israel to exist. And yet, they're going with this idea that murdering civilians is the same thing as accomplishing military objectives. I don't buy their premise. They do. I don't. I want to get Scott Ritter's take on that, to get his military point of view. The guy's been in the military for God knows how long. He will be able to give a good assessment. At the end, we have Garland and we have Scotty Nello Hughes. Garland is one that got me on radio. Always love it when he joins me. And Scotty Nello Hughes, Republican, right leaning. That should be an interesting conversation to get her take on how they view this political race. So share the content, man. I'm going to be here 7 to 10, and I'm going to provide you with subject matter experts, damn good analysis, damn good opinion, and this is going to be the best damn morning show ever in the history of evers. That's my objective. That's what we're going to do. Like I said, share it, like it, help me grow this channel. That is my objective. So, what time is it? It is 7:18. All right, real quick. I am fascinated by this new phenomena where political people running for president don't want to do real town halls. What I mean by that, Kamala Harris was doing a town hall with Liz, and in that town hall, the following question, one second, the following question came up. Let's see, that is going to be number, clip number, where is it? Clip number 6. All right. I'm sorry, in the old days, I had a producer doing that.
You're not, unfortunately. We have some pre-determined questions, and hopefully I'll be able to ask some of the questions that might be in your head. I hope so.
You heard that, right? So they're at a town hall. And at the town hall, apparently someone asked the question, well, hey, we'll be able to get questions in which case you got her, I guess, an announcer, somebody who's helping run it, come out and say,
You're not, unfortunately. We have some pre-determined questions, and hopefully I'll be able to ask some of the questions that might be in your head. I hope so.
she hopes to get to some of the questions that may be in that person's head. Maybe we'll get to something that you're actually thinking about. But if not, I'm sorry. And to be very clear, Donald Trump was doing the same thing, going with these fake-ish or town hall-ish type things that they're trying to sell as a town hall. What these candidates seem to miss, or what they're trying to do, is to get credit for doing a town hall without actually doing a town hall. Truth is, variability is built into town halls, meaning it's not scripted. The thing is, people can be somewhat unpredictable. And so you can have people, a person in a town hall, ask a question that the candidate was not expecting, that the people who there were not expecting, and the candidate has to expose something of themselves to the better or to their detriment. Meaning, it's one thing for a candidate to book up, and in the context of booking up, be prepared for pretty much anything that comes up. It's another thing, though, even in the context of them booking up, will get hit with questions that are outside of their bubble that they would have to resolve and they would have to deal with. That is to the betterment of the better candidates. I'll give you an example. When Bernie Sanders was having a conversation with Chris Matthews. Now, Chris Matthews was the guy that said something like, if Bernie Sanders takes it, he's going to take it for a generation. And so Democrats are better off tanking it to Donald Trump, basically letting Trump win it to avoid Sanders taking it. So that gives you the context of this interviewer. And he is pushing Sanders, pushing Sanders, pushing Sanders. And I remember Sanders, exasperated, gives this very honest, non-political answer. And I was listening, I was like, that's great. Because the truth of it is, what he's exposing is, what do you actually believe? And sometimes those odd questions gets into, what do you actually believe? None of this political fluff. What do you actually believe? 3 a.m. between you and your God. What is it that you say? What are the things that you actually think about? That is what unscripted, unpredictable interviews and conversations get you. It is clear that that is not what they want. That is not what they want, especially Kamala Harris. The more Kamala Harris has talked over the last few months, the further she's gotten down in the polls. I mean, don't take my word for it. Looking at the polls recently, right here. Let's flip to this. Okay, maybe let's not flip to that. All right, right here. Donald Trump is now taking his first ever lead, 538's Pennsylvania polling average. Pennsylvania is a state that Kamala Harris needs. Trump 47.9, Kamala Harris 47.5. To be very clear, Pennsylvania was one of those states that Republicans used to only dream about getting. They used to only dream about getting. Democrats had it for like 50 years, give or take. I'm estimating, but don't hold me to that exact number. Here's another one. General election poll among Arab Americans. Trump 45, Harris 43. Stein 4%. It is amazing that Stein may actually hit 5% in among Arab voters. And again, this is because Joe Biden has been backing the genocide in Gaza. Again, these are votes that she could get, but she doesn't want to change policy. And when you get to, I believe it's the CBS News poll that has Donald Trump up. NBC News poll, I believe, has Donald Trump up. She was down 5 points. The score is now 47-46 towards Trump. Like, all of this stuff is a changeover. Kamala Harris had gotten a bump when she got into the race. But it seems like the more she talked, the more she exposed herself, the less well she did. And if I had to really guess, and if I had to really put it on anything, like for example, when you have an unpredictable panel, you may get a question like this.
You're not, unfortunately. We have some
He is unstable, Brett.
He's not well. You say he's mentally not stable?
He's not stable.
Let me ask you this. You told
we
many
should all be
interviewers
concerned.
that Joe Biden was on his game, that ran around circles on his staff. When did you first notice that President Biden's mental faculties appeared diminished?
Joe Biden.
Notice the look on her face. this was something that I kept pointing out. How are you telling me now that Donald Trump is out of his mind, he's unstable, when you were walking around hiding and shilling for Joe Biden? Joe Biden was clearly out of his mind. Harris was one of those people that hid the fact that Joe Biden was out of his mind. Joe Biden is strong. Joe Biden is vigorous. Joe Biden has strong sex with Joe Biden every night, with no condom. And then he goes on the debate stage, and you see the real Joe Biden, and the jig was up. And yet, she comes out and talks about Donald Trump being unfit. It comes across as disingenuous. You didn't care about it when it was Joe Biden, but now all of a sudden you care about it now that it's Donald Trump. I guess my point is, questions like that would bubble up in an unscripted event. And it's those questions that she is trying to prevent. Here's the thing. Unpredictability is not a bug of town halls. It's a feature of town halls. And in no way at all should you get credit for having a town hall. Something that was a minor thing in politics, just a given. Shouldn't get credit for something that you don't do. You guys are listening to Fault Lines. My name is Jamarl Thomas. I'm going to take a commercial break. Like, share the content. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. My name is Jamal Thomas, and of course, you're not seeing me right now. There you are. Now you can see me. I hope you guys are doing all right. There you are. Hope you guys are doing all right. Getting the technology straight for my next guest. Let me make sure I get this right. Forgive me for a moment. There we are. Yeah, I am eager to bring him on. Efshin, when he gets here, I always mess his name up, but he is a great guest. He knows his stuff. Um, he's going to join me in a moment. There we are. Let's see. Efshan is connected to audio. Can I hear you yet? All right. When he gets here, he is going to be able to join me. Let's see. Okay. He's going to join me shortly. Efshin, there you are. How are you doing today?
Hi,
I finally,
quite well.
I finally get to actually see you. Usually I'm on radio and we don't get the opportunity. Ishan Surfanijad, Surfanijad. I'm glad
You
you could join.
pronounce it right the first time.
Oh, did I? Did I? Surfanijad.
Yeah,
Okay, fair enough. How you doing today? Are you doing all right?
yeah, everything is great.
And just to give the audience to let you know who you are, he is an Iran-backed journalist who shares analysis on news, geopolitics on Iran, the Middle East, Russia, China, and the global South. And I am grateful to have you with us. So there are a few questions that I had that I've been completely interested in, and so I am.
Apologies, I lost your audio.
Oh, you can't hear me? How about now?
Oh,
It's. Can you hear me? Uh,
um,
Wait a minute. One second. Let me make sure.
no, I can hear you, but now it's being broadcast.
Okay, wait a minute. Let's see what's going on.
So,
Okay, wait a minute. I just want to make sure what's going on. Okay, how about now? Can you hear me all right?
yes,
Okay,
yes.
okay, good, 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 good. All right, so I guess first question. In preparation what seems to be an imminent attack by Iran, I'm curious about the conversation that's taking place in Iran. Like, meaning from three levels. What is the public saying? What is the media saying? And what is the political branch saying about it?
Well, um, I mean, in Iran, uh, in amongst the general population, there doesn't seem to be much concern about the Israeli attack. There's not really that much discussion, but amongst the analysts, the experts, they're now analyzing the different ways by which Israel can damage the Iranian infrastructure, damage targets. They are trying to analyze and maybe foresee uh, which targets Israel will attack, how they will go about doing it. Amongst the uh, political brass, the same thing is going on. Uh, Obviously, I think 2 days ago, at the time of this recording, I don't know whether we are live or
No, we're
yeah.
live. No, no,
So
we're live.
I think it, yeah, I think it was 2 days ago that an article was, some documents actually were leaked uh, from DoD, one of the intelligence agencies that is working underneath the DoD about United States analysis on how Israel will go on about attacking Iran. So that document is being talked about amongst the population, again, not the population, the political brass and the analysts. They're trying to assess and really, really um, pay attention to the details of those documents to see uh, what will probably take place in future.
I'm glad you bring up the leaked documents. This was released by, I believe, Middle East Spectator, and they were released in a clandestine way. They were talking about top secret U.S. intelligence that apparently we were able to get from geospatial intelligence or something to that effect. And yeah, initially there was questions about whether they were legit, but there is a bit of a fervor here in the United States over the release of those documents. I'm curious, from from Iran's standpoint, why do they think that the documents were released from the Iranian perspective? Or do they think it's in order to inhibit, to put a pause on Israel's strike? What does Iran believe is the rationale for the release of those documents?
Well, I would say that there is not really a universal consensus amongst the Iranians as to what was the intention on this one. I can only speak on my behalf. There has been a series of leaks, like I wouldn't say lately, but these past few episodes of leaked documents being published online. They all seem a little bit fishy. I mean, the last one that I remember was published from the National Guard on U.S. assessment about the Ukrainian capabilities vis-a-vis the Russian special military operation. And no matter how you look at it, it looks suspicious, right? There is a very considerable probability that these documents were actually leaked because United States tries to, as you mentioned, inhibit the Israelis and their capability and their sort of unveil their actions, their plans, so that the war wouldn't expand. I mean, previously they talked about how Israel doesn't have enough interceptors.
Right.
They're running into a shortage of interceptors, and then this one. So you see a trend. You see a trend, and if you follow that trend, it seems that the U.S. administration is not really keen on following into another war, because I mean this time it's different, right? And despite the fact that people bring up the THAAD air defense systems being deployed in the occupied Palestine, it's not going to be a game changer. And we can talk about it later on in more details as to why that is the case. But it is not going to be the game changer. So I think that the Americans actually have a very firm grasp and understanding of what is happening, and they're trying to ameliorate the situation. They're trying to, I think it would be a once in my lifetime that I'm going to say, but Americans are behaving more like the responsible party right now. It's very hard for me to utter these words.
I am shocked that you're saying that. I'm shocked by that.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I guess from my point of view, if they're being the responsible party, they stop sending weapons. Like, if
100%,
if you are really basically saying, we don't want you to do this, meaning I don't want you to go into Lebanon, I don't want you to attack Iran because it's going to be a catastrophic war that you may not even survive through, you stop sending weapons. They're not doing that. And, they may not be doing that for political considerations, or maybe the Israeli lobby has that much influence. I don't know. But you may be right that they don't want to say anything aloud, and so they go in this kind of clandestine way of leaking information and give it to kind of a third cutout in order to do it. One of the other questions that I have, especially in the context of what's taking place. So, Deputy Commander to Coordination for the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Quds Force, Brigadier General Araj, I think this is Mesjadi told reporters that Iran is fully prepared to respond to any threat. Quote, the armed forces of the Islamic Republic of Iran stand at full readiness, unquote. What does that mean in real terms? How is the country preparing? Are you seeing anything on the ground that is noticeably different than it was prior to this kind of threat that's looming? What's changed?
Okay, so when you talk about we seeing things, uh, usually there are these at times like this. I mean, I wouldn't say usually because Iran is rather a stable country.
Right.
It's peaceful. There is not that much, chaos that would, sort of disrupt the Iranian peace and a daily life, on his or her daily life. But in previous episodes, we saw the Iranian tellers, the missile launchers, the mobile transportable uh, uh, missile launchers being on the move on the highways. This time around, we don't see that. So, in terms of people seeing it in their daily life, when they're making commune to their work, would see the batteries on the road. No, that isn't happening. But there are a few ways that they're doing it, and one of the main ones is how they arrange different air defense systems and the actions that they are taking in order to protect targets that are of vital importance to Iran and Iranian infrastructure. Another thing that they are doing, so deterrence comes in different forms, right? You have deterrence through access of denial, which is in all terms, it was building a castle with high walls and a rather big or deep moat in order to prevent the enemy from entering your castle, your city, whatever. In modern terms, it's the air defense systems, it's the electronic warfare capabilities that you have in order to, disrupt the enemy signals or hackers from entering your domain. So they are dispatching air defense systems near important military bases, important economic targets, infrastructures. Uh, that's one thing. But the other thing that they are doing, and this one is the more prominent one. Uh, in, they're trying to send a signal that the respond to any Israeli aggression is going to be rather harsh. Uh, so, so the second, this is deterrence through creating a big enough of a reason for the enemy, so that when it is trying to cost benefit to calculate the sort of cost to benefit ratio, they would find it high enough for them to not be really willing to go and escalate to the level that they might have otherwise would escalate.
I am so glad you said that because I this has been the part that has fascinated me to no end, and I want to get your take on the Iranian perspective, meaning the chatter in Iran over this. Israel is vulnerable, and for the first time, I guess in my lifetime, it is clear they're vulnerable. They're getting hit by Hezbollah missiles, and Iran was able to cut through their missile defense shield like butter, like knife through butter. They can be hit. It is clear they could be hit, and they could be hit with pinpoint precision, which is exactly what Iran chose to demonstrate when they retaliated for the killing of Hanaya in Tehran. Knowing that's true, and knowing that Israel can't defend itself. I mean, even the first time around, it required America, France, Britain, Jordan to basically knock missiles out of the sky. If Iran sends 2,000 missiles, the THAAD system is not going to matter. They're already running low of Iron Dome missiles. They're already running low of missiles. The THAAD system has very few missiles in existence as is. So what is their thinking? Does Israel really believe that they're going to do a decapitation strike that's going to stop Iran from being able to respond? Because if not, the response is going to be overwhelming. What do you think Israel is thinking in the sense? I don't quite get how they think they're going to get out of this unscathed.
Well, the main problem is that I believe that they're not really thinking while doing this. It's just lashing out on other parties, other countries in the region. But you're absolutely right. But there is a little bit more nuance to this. Look, uh, why did they decide to assassinate Mr. Haniyeh at the day of the inauguration of the Iranian president? There was a message there. I think that the assessment of the Israelis is that the reformist party that is currently in power in Iran has less of an incentive to respond to Israeli aggressions rather than the previous administration in Iran, the administration of Dr. Raisi, right? That was why it took Iran such a long time. One of the reasons that it took Iran such a long time in order to respond to the assassination of Mr. Haniyeh in Iran, right? So that was one thing. And the Iranian response, I was waiting for an opportunity, rather complicated and multifaceted response that can be analyzed through different goggles. One goggle is you look at the technology showcase. You put the Israeli air defense system in front of the Iranian missiles, and you see that the Iranian missiles ripping through the Israeli air defense system. That's one way of looking at it. But then you go and look at the targets that Iran hit. It's very easy to say that out of the 32 hits on Nevatim Air Base, which is one of the most secure places in the whole world against a ballistic missile attack. And it's very easy to look at that base and say, well, there are 32 hits, right? But a considerable portion of them actually hit the places that are not of vital importance. And then would say, okay, so the Iranians were able to move past our air defense system, but they weren't able to pinpoint, to target the places that they wanted to target with pinpoint accuracy, which would be false because you see one of those missiles hitting the runway. The runway isn't that big. The width of a runway isn't that big. That means that the Iranians wanted to target that runway. But here comes the complexity. So they were targeting the places, and they actually succeeded in targeting what they wanted to target. So what is the problem here? Lack of political will. And it's a major factor. I've already said, I've said it before on other shows, there are two factors that are very important in order for you to choose your ally or enemy. One is their capability, right? Russia is a very capable country. China is a very capable country, both superpowers, right? But they're also rather unwilling in order to jump into a conflict. Powers, but they're not really politically invested in doing those things. I think that the Israelis are sensing that Iran is not really willing to carry out an attack that would, really damage the Israeli infrastructure. So maybe they're banking on that. It's still a gamble. Let's be completely honest. It's still a gamble because the Iranians have already shot 2 warning shots, right? Operation True Promise 1 and Operation True Promise 2. This time around, there's a very high probability and in all likelihood, Iran will actually target the places that would cause serious casualties for Israel. But I think that they're still banking on that. Plus, they are using in terms of the THAAD system that US has dispatched to Israel. I think one of the things that give them hope is that they're using the American soldiers as cannon fodders, right? Their deterrence comes from the point that no one is crazy enough to target a U.S. Personnel, right? That's how they are creating deterrence. So I
They're
think
using human
it's a
shields.
combination of these.
They're using human shields.
Yes, exactly.
They're using American human shields. Because we were looking at it as a tripwire. This thought of Netanyahu banking on the idea that he can drag America into a war. And basically saying, okay, well, we can put Americans in. If those Americans are hit, then America has a higher probability of getting involved because Americans were hit. Mind you, he's using them as human shields. And the argument that Netanyahu has made is any human shield is fair game. If there's one Hamas fighter in a hospital, you can destroy the hospital. If there's one Hezbollah in an apartment building, you can kill 400 people in order to get that one Hamas person because they're human shields. Okay, well, those Americans are literally being put there to shield those THAAD defense systems from being hit by either Hezbollah or, for that matter, Iran. How are they not fair game since they're in a war zone? At least that's the way I
mean,
see it.
If one doesn't subscribe to double standard, it's actually how you described it, right?
Right.
But I mean that the problem is that again, it's United States of America that we're talking about, the most powerful military in the world, right? And you don't go and pick up a war with United States. I think it's rather a good time to talk about that missile if you
Yeah,
if you
please. I mean, because I got to be honest, I don't. Is the THAAD system being seen purely as a political instrument? Because I'm unclear on, for example, if Iran puts up 2,000 missiles, ballistic, hypersonic, let's say every THAAD missile that goes up hits its target, Israel is still going to be decimated. So, how are they looking at the THAAD system? Do you agree with that first? And give me your take on the purpose of the system being there.
okay, quite a few things to unpack here. Uh, the first thing, look, one of the things that countries do when they want to carry an attack is the suppression of air defense, enemy air defense, right? S SEAD, I think it's called, suppression of enemy air defense systems. By putting that there, you are making sure that Iran will not be able to do that because I mean, it's clear. If Iran does that, that means targeting that, which means basically declaring war on United States of America. So you're sort of inhibiting Iran from, sort of tapping into one of the groups of operations that it can tap into. Second thing is that if you compare THAAD missile with Arrow 2 and Arrow 3, there is a very valid argument to make that Arrow 2 and Arrow 3 in combination actually work rather better than THAAD missile. I mean, the name of the warhead on the interceptors, we're not calling them warhead, calling them kill vehicle. They have better maneuverability and they're more potent. The only difference being that Arrow 2 and Arrow 3 are sort of silo-based interceptors, and that being more transportable, right? And when we say it's more transportable, it doesn't mean that they're going to be able to move it in an hour, but this being transportable also factors in the areas that you can protect. If you somehow get information on where the potential Iranian targets would be, then it will create you with a window of opportunity to do something about that. So that's the second thing. But in terms of, again, the capability in intercepting like the missiles, there is a very good thread by this analyst. I forgot how his name is pronounced. Is Pataramas or something like that? a rather famous guy on Twitter. He actually sort of analyzed how hypersonic missiles of Iran would fare against THAAD missiles. And to sum up all the complicated military jargon, it's not really a big threat to the Iranian missiles, Iranian hypersonic missiles. So it doesn't change anything drastically. But yeah, it's a more of a political game that they are playing, trying to use exactly what you did. Use the American soldiers as human shields.
I guess it's, yeah, human shields in order to prevent the destruction of air defense, preserving their air defense for any kind of Iranian counterstrike. And yeah, I agree with you. Whether it's in Ukraine, whether it's in the Middle East, it seems that the West is using the pragmatism of its enemies as a tool to provoke and continue the conflict. It's like any notion of pragmatism is seen as weakness, whether that's in Ukraine, whether that's against Iran. And yeah, I guess we're going to see what Iran does when Israel, I would say, jump off the ledge. I think it's deranged that they would do this, but they seem to be hell-bent on doing it. So, man, I want to thank you for joining me on this. I really appreciated this. You're very informative, and you always give me something to think about, give the audience kind of food for thought. Ishan Safanajad, he is an Iran-based journalist who shares analysis on news, geopolitics, and the Middle East, Russia, China, and the global South. Man, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me, and sorry for the technical difficulties.
No, that's not your fault. Trust me, yesterday, oh man, everything that could go wrong went wrong yesterday. So no, I appreciate it. You have a good one. All right, guys, I'm going to take a quick break. I will be in a moment. All right, man, thanks again for coming, okay? All right, and let's see.
Thanks for inviting me. I hope that you will do great in your new show. It's kind of sad that when you told me that they have imposed a new round of sanctions and that show was cancelled. Just I don't know. It made me really sad.
Yeah, it's painful to put it mildly, but it's okay. You have a good one, man. I'll see you later. Be safe. Let's see. How do I?
Take it. Bye.
What do I? There we go. Welcome back to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is my show. I am glad that you all can join me on this escapade out. I'm waiting for my guest. He's going to be on shortly. I'm going to be joined by the one and only Scott Ritter. He is going to be talking about the military realities on the ground in any kind of strike taking place between Israel and Iran. And look, it is, as I pointed out in the conversation with Sean, it is a weird thing, right? You would think that countries will take great pains, especially when those countries find themselves to be vulnerable. And the truth of the matter is, Israel is a vulnerable country. Before October 7th, there was this thought of invincibility associated with Israel. They have the Iron Dome, they have the David Sling, or whatever it's called. But truth be told, that invincibility was always against women and children, kids throwing rocks, or bottle rockets. At this point, what Israel is chest thumping and triumphing, the death of Yahya Sinwar, or the killing of Yahya Sinwar, the killing of Nasrallah, the attacks on pagers. Okay, all of these things are killing individuals, even if they're willing to kill hundreds of people to get that particular individual. But if you think about it, they are still bogged down in Gaza. They are bogged down in the West Bank. They have made very little progress in Lebanon, southern Lebanon, and they have started to take casualties in a war that has taken place over the course of a year on multiple fronts. They have an economy that seems to be falling off of a cliff, with many of the people going back to their own home countries. And to this, they're adding, we're also now going to hit Iran. This seems to be greatly misplaced. And yet, they're proceeding with it, which leaves some people scratching their heads. My argument has been that what Israel wants is to create greater Israel. Their objective is to create this idea of, we're going to use October 7th as our 9/11 moment to reshape the Middle East. We're going to take part of Lebanon. We're going to take part of Syria. We're going to take the north of Gaza. We're going to build new settlements. We are going, this is our time. This is our chance. There's Netanyahu. It's true that there's a political element to him staying in office and doing what he's doing. He has a hard right government. All things being equal, he doesn't necessarily want to go to jail. And so he's politically incentivized to take the course of action that he's been taking. By the same token, if you talk to people who have lived in Israel, it is difficult to wrap your head around. It is a fascist country. They are taught, in many respects, to be a fascist country. The indoctrination that the kids get as they're growing up. One of the gentlemen, Rabbi Yaakov, was telling me about the way they do the Holocaust, like taking 2 or 3 or 4-year-olds to see concentration camps and drilling it into their heads what took place, this kind of bathing in the Holocaust as a way of political orientation in one sense. But just like kids who are raised in the church, that stuff sticks with them as they get older, and it takes a little bit in order to kind of unravel that. I guess my point is, it's hard for us to fathom the willingness of that population to kill en masse. It's difficult for us to reconcile that. So when we see all of these people being slaughtered, people being burned alive, kids being burned alive, hospitals being blown up, with this continuing behavior, people literally being starved, Blinken lying to Congress about Palestinians being starved. We see this stuff. It's ghastly. And simultaneously, we see Israel celebrating. There we are. He's here. Scott, welcome to the show. How you doing this morning? Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you fine. Can you
Oh,
hear me?
yes, I can hear you, man. Thank you for joining me. It's good to see you. I hope you've been doing all right. I always value your opinion on these matters, so I'm glad that you can join me. Scott Ritter, just to give people, let them know who you are. He is a former UN weapons inspector and weapons of mass destruction whistleblower, and a friend of the show. I've always appreciated your counsel on these matters. So I want to go into the very basic key point. Israel has decided it will strike. The plans apparently have been made. And I guess my thing, and the thing that has blown me away, is that they are vulnerable. And yet they're still willing to do this strike, knowing full well that Iran is going to respond with overwhelming force. From your point of view, what does a military strike by Israel even look like in real terms? Like, what is it in real world terms? What does that strike consist of, and what does that strike look like?
Well, we have some insight into this because of the leak of some intelligence documents recently. They describe the handling of 16 so-called Golden Horizon air-launched ballistic missiles. These are believed to be a variant of the Sparrow family of missiles developed by Israel. Two Sparrows were allegedly used by Israel to strike Isfahan back in April in their retaliation strike. And then up to 40 what are known as ROCs. It's a joint U.S.-Israeli weapon system, again, an air-launched ballistic missile. So, you know, based upon that, I would say that these Golden Horizon missiles would be used to suppress air defense systems that would clear the way for the rocks to go in and hit more specific targets. The Golden Horizon missiles have a longer range than the rocks, so that the Israelis would be able to, you know, launch these systems outside of Iranian air defense capabilities, suppress air defense, allowing other planes to come in closer to release the rocks that would then penetrate and strike. So we're looking at, you know, frankly speaking, when you look at the amount of ordnance that is used here, it's not very big. This is not an overwhelming strike or a massive strike, but it could be a strike against very selected targets. This is the kind of package I would imagine that would go to take out a leadership target or you know, a high-profile military target of that nature. When we did strikes during the Gulf War, you know, this is about the size of a package that we would use to take out a military facility or overwhelming massive strike designed to destroy Iran. This appears to be a very tailored strike designed to destroy you know, a specific target or, you know, several targets in an area. Um, you know, the rocks are, it's a point. Each rock will destroy, say, a building. So if you're destroying a military facility, you know, and you sometimes would put more than one weapon on a system to ensure destruction. So let's say 2 to 1, 2 rocks per building. You're talking 20 impact points. You know, 20 places of destruction. And again, that could be reduced because on some targets you might have to put more than 2 on there. So we're not talking about, you know, a strike that's going to blanket Iran and bring Iran down overnight, which now begs the question: why are they doing this?
Exactly.
Because
They're going to get hit
because
in
the
response.
counter strike is going to be 1,000 or 2,000 precision Iranian missiles that will totally devastate Israel. Now, the only thing I can think of is that the Israelis are looking for an excuse then to escalate further. Um, and that escalation could include nuclear weapons. Um, you know, the idea that Israel would lead off with a preemptive nuclear strike, you know, is not one that's, you know, outside of certain conspiracy circles really viable. If Israel led with nuclear weapons, that would be Israel committing suicide. But if Israel strikes Iran, saying that they needed to because of retaliation for the Iranian strike, and then Iran strikes Israel very hard, creating an existential threat to Israel. This could provide the political cover Israel could need to escalate to take out Iran's nuclear, oil, and leadership targets using um, their strategic nuclear forces. So that's the only thing I can think of, because by and of itself, this is like a light middleweight fighter going up against Mike Tyson
Yeah,
and punching him in the um. So this makes no sense.
yeah.
This.
I didn't get it. I kept thinking Israel is going to get hit with overwhelming force. I mean, in fact, the way I placed it, I'm sorry, I didn't see you come in. I was given given a little space. The way I see it, the economy is failing. They're stuck in Gaza, meaning they haven't necessarily cleared out Gaza. In fact, a report came out, I believe this was a day or so ago, an Israeli newspaper. And there's a part in it, it says, many parents say that the morale of the fighters began as early as April, with IDF shuffling through Gaza with a sense of satisfaction and wearing meaning and determination. Quote, when the return began, the places we saw like Jabaliah, Zaytum, Shalaya, it broke the soldiers, unquote. It explains these are the places that they lost their friends. The area was already clear. It had to be preserved. It's frustrated them a lot. What kills them is the condition and the duration of the fighting with no horizon and no end. You never know where you're going to come out, and it's been like that for a year, not to mention the loss and the harsh signs they see in Gaza. Basically, they're pointing out that we don't know when this is going to end. This is just continuing, going back to the same areas that we cleared before, and we have to keep going back. That's in Gaza. In Lebanon, they seem to be bogged down in southern Lebanon, where they have found themselves in a war of attrition for over a year now. And now they're escalating this to Iran. And the strike that they're thinking about for Iran is relatively minor strike for a country 3 times the size of Iraq. So yeah, I was left with this question of why are they doing this? What is the point? And I guess your point is this could be a tripwire for nuclear weapons. That is disturbing.
Either nuclear weapons or getting the United States to agree to intervene to prevent Israel from using nuclear weapons. I think this is part and parcel of an Israeli blackmail program, against geopolitical blackmail against the United States. The United States is, under the Biden administration, has made it clear that it has no intention of participating. But Israel is, this isn't for Netanyahu, and I think we also have to remember this. We have to really stop saying Israel when we talk about the planning, and just say Netanyahu, because this isn't about Israel or doing what's best for Israel. This is about Netanyahu salvaging his political legacy, and trying to leave the political stage on terms that are acceptable to him. So he is desperate to be seen as the man who saved Israel at this point in time, because he has failed in Gaza, he has failed in southern Lebanon. His last remaining opportunity to come out victorious is to have this existential struggle with Iran. And so he's trying to provoke a struggle of such proportions and such consequence that the United States will have no choice but to join him on this fight. It's a massive gamble on his part.
Yeah, and he's risking, I would argue, the existence of Israel in and of itself, whether it's through military means or, for that matter, economic means. I'm curious. I'm glad you brought up the leaked documents. So, Middle East Eye apparently got these documents. They were top secret. Um, it seems like it was a U.S. assessment of Israel and their capabilities and their preparations for the attack on Iran. You went through some of it, basically pointing out that this is not going to be a major strike. This is somewhat of a minor strike. In the document, they mention nuclear weapons, which is pretty wild because the United States doesn't acknowledge formally that Israel has nuclear weapons, even though everybody knows that they have them. The document said that it thinks that it may not, or it's not looking to use them, which is, again, even terrifying because that means that somebody considered they may use nuclear weapons, which is, again, somewhat of astonishing. What do you think this leak came from? And what do you think the point of this leak was?
Well, do you remember that airman that leaked those
Jack
documents
Texera.
earlier this year?
Yeah.
And all right, these documents are structured in the same the same format, et cetera. So these are standard Department of Defense briefing documents. Um, that are prepared for aftermath of this breach that took place with the airmen. Um, Stop farming out intelligence products to a variety of sources, Air National Guard or reserve intelligence sources to prepare them to try and consolidate. But there's still these documents. Back when I was in, which was a long time ago, um, we didn't farm anything out. I mean, if you were the principal analyst, you produced your own documents, you produced your own work. If I had to produce something, I would go to a Defense Intelligence Agency graphics shop and have them pound out something for me, or I'd go to CIA graphics shop and have them pound out something for me, or I'd go to my own graphic shop and pound it out for me. But the idea that I, I was part of this constellation of intelligence resources that collaborated to produce a document was absurd. But that's what they've done today. Um, they would have tried to bring that in, but I still believe that there are too many people touching documents they shouldn't touch. Um, and therefore, there's just plenty of opportunity out there for security breaches of this nature. The the other thing that I would point out is that when you get to documents of this sensitivity, there's usually some sort of um, when they're if there's extremely restricted distribution, there's some sort of indicator within the document of which version of the document it is that helps guide who it went to, so that if it is leaked, for instance, if I produced a document or somebody produced a document and gave you a copy of it and gave me a copy of it, your copy is going to have embedded somewhere in that document that's something that's unique to you. And my copy is going to have something embedded unique to me. So if I leak the document, people are going to look and say, and they're going to exclude you as a possibility because this isn't the version that you got. It's going to be very subtle. It's going to be something that, unless you are looking for it, you're not going to see it. Um, and so this means that whoever leaked it is either going to be caught or B had permission.
Right there. Is this the Biden administration in a
So that
clandestine? Yeah, yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and so, but this is I mean, it's a very sensitive document if it's real, and I believe it is. I mean, it has the appropriate classification markings. It's organized properly. Um, but there's several things about this. The the classification shows that it is probably comprised primarily of overhead collection. That's a euphemism for satellites. Um, but there's more to it than that because now when you get into the specificity of the targets being identified, saying they handled this here, this there, this here, that allows the Israelis to go back and reverse engineer the timing of collection, which could give away capabilities. To give you an example, um, when we normally see a satellite photograph, we're thinking, well, that's a satellite coming over in daytime and taking a picture. Um, but it's more than that. If I describe things in the photograph, I'm giving away the resolution. So I'm describing how much detail I can discern from that. That gives away a capability of the satellite. Likewise, if the description is being given at nighttime, something that took place at nighttime, I'm giving away a night collection capability again of and giving away the resolution. These are details that the U.S. government doesn't want released, um, and because it helps an enemy uh, determine how to evade collection. And we spent billions of dollars putting up something in the air to take photographs that we hope give us good insight. And if the enemy knows about what we're doing, because the other thing is the timing of the day may show the where the satellite is at the timing of the photograph, because you go back and reverse engineer it. So if they describe something that happened only on October 6th at 1 o'clock, the Israelis will go back and see where all the constellation of satellites the U.S. has passed over, and it'll give away, if the only one passed over here, it gives away maybe that it can take a nice high resolution photograph from further away than maybe the Israelis figured. So this document is damaging. Also, the other reason why I don't think it's an official leak is that this document incorporates, I believe, intelligence from British sources, and this would be damaging to our intelligence relationship with the British to give away their capabilities. And this document also, um, in and itself, is going to be very damaging to the U.S.-Israeli relationship. So there are ways, I'm old school, meaning I've been around a long time, and so there are ways to leak information that do not require you to give away a document that is this damaging to the U.S. intelligence community, both in terms of collection and liaison potential. The background brief, I mean, the way I would have done this if I were leaking this is I would have gone to, my official leaker. They exist in Washington, D.C., every agency, and I would say, who's your source at the New York Times or wherever you want this out. Um, you need to go have a lunch, and you need to tell him about these details. But this is how I want you to phrase it. This, and now you go and have a lunch, and now what happens is that person, and then what I would do is I would have him have lunch with 7 people, have that source have lunch with 7 people. Each one of them would have a conversation, just to try and protect the guy, because now you're showing that this guy speaks with a lot of people, but you give him the information that appears, and it comes from an anonymous government source says this, that, and the other thing. Very difficult to trace back. Very difficult to. You don't have to give away capabilities. This was almost a panic move by somebody. This release of these documents was, I believe, a panic move by somebody who wasn't operating with authority, who was operating on an individual capacity, and is taking great risk because if you remember Reality Winner,
She was
the
prosecuted.
young lady,
Yeah.
and jailed for. And whoever did this, if they get caught, they're going to be prosecuted and put in jail because the documents that were leaked are every bit as sensitive as the documents she undoubtedly thought they're doing the right thing. But when you're playing with U.S. government secrets, especially um, intelligence secrets, you have no legal authority to release them. You may believe that you're morally correct. Daniel Ellsberg is an example of this, a man who did us all a huge favor. Edward Snowden did us a huge favor by exposing the violations of the Constitution, the Fourth Amendment carried out by the intelligence community, and leaking his documents. But that will not shield you from prosecution. And if you're arrested, you will be prosecuted and you'll go to jail for a long time.
Scott, we have about a few minutes left. I want to go into the death of Yahya Sinwar. So this, wait a minute, I'm sorry. This clip is of his death. For some reason, Israel published this. I don't know why they thought this was on some level. Um, you might not be able to see it, but the audience can see it. But it shows him sitting in the room. Apparently, there was a tank shell. With his last breath, he takes a stick and throws it at the camera in utter defiance at the very end.
Yeah.
And I suppose they were showing this with the thought of, oh, look at him getting killed. That's not the way it gets interpreted, nor should it, right? Also, to kill Nasrallah, I guess the question is Israel winning? I mean, the way they talk about this is if we are triumphant, we're winning, we're able to kill all of these people. Is that really a win, though? Or is that really, should that, the ability to kill civilians, be considered a win? Yeah, they got these people, but are they in a strategically winning position, or is this ice skating? What's going on?
I think this, and again, I say as having worked with Israeli intelligence on a very close level for 4 years in the 1990s, they had a shift in their the logic of their underlying analysis. And what I mean by that, in 1973, in the lead up to the Yom Kippur War, the Israelis suffered one of their greatest intelligence failures in not recognizing. They collected all their information that showed that this was happening. Politically, the leaders made a decision that Egypt would never make that choice. So they created something afterwards as part of their intelligence cleanup, the notion of the doubting Thomas. And they also created within their intelligence structure people whose job it was to study on an intimate level the leadership and the nature of the problems. And I worked with the Israelis on the Iraqi target. I spoke with the man who was supposed to be Saddam Hussein, who thought like Saddam, et cetera, tried to train him upon what I observed, how to think like Saddam, et cetera. Um, and in the end, the Israelis came up with a very rational conclusion that Iraq wasn't the threat that they thought it was, because prior to our work, the UN work with Israel, Israel said the only way they can resolve this issue is to kill Saddam Hussein. And they actually put in place a plan to kill Saddam Hussein. Um, but afterwards, they said, no, Saddam's a rational actor and we can contain Saddam. And the other thing they realized, contain Saddam by getting rid of the weapons of mass destruction. The other thing they realized is that if you kill Saddam without a plan to replace Saddam, you have no idea what you're going to get, that you can deal with the devil that you know. This is a rational way of thinking. But then by 1998, it was clear to the Israelis that the United States was committed to regime change. And so the Israelis purged that old 1973 reformed intelligence community and went into one that allowed them to cherry pick intelligence, allowed them um, not to do the doubting. The doubting Thomas, his job was to make sure that anything that went upstairs um, had been thoroughly vetted, that no um, analytical traps were set, people not fully thinking out or fleshing out the assessments. So if the doubting Thomas went back and said, how do you know this? What's your source on this? You had to answer before it went up. Now they got rid of the doubting Thomas, which allowed people to send things up top that hadn't been purged. And this shapes and corrupts your intelligence product. And what I believe has happened here is that the Israelis have returned to an oversimplified, over politicized assessment of the area where they be to kill Hassan Nasrallah. When in fact, Hezbollah is an organization that is so much more than one man. Um, the same thing, the best way to defeat Hamas would be to kill Yahya Sinwar, as if Hamas was personified in this one person. And this is the trap. The same thing. I believe that based upon those documents, that one of the targets the Israelis might be seeking to take out is the supreme leader in Iran, under the belief that if they kill Ali Khamenei, that they will collapse the Islamic Republic, create the opportunity for this uprising from within that the Israelis have been working with the Baluch, the Kurds, the Azeris, the Arabs, the MEK, and others. This is my assessment. This
Yeah.
is what I believe. What they don't realize is that there's an organization constitutionally inside Iran called the Assembly of Experts, and they are tasked with constitutionally to have a replacement already identified, so that if the supreme leader is killed or is indisposed, or something happens where he can no longer lead, that there is no period of time of uncertainty, that they will meet and they will say, this is the new supreme leader. Um, and so they don't respect the institution of the Islamic Republic, just like they don't respect the institution of Hezbollah or the institution of Hamas. They've allowed a politicized pressure to be put down there, because if you respect the institution of Hamas, um, then it becomes difficult to describe victory. For instance, you had an Israeli general say, "We'll never be able to defeat Hamas because Hamas is an ideology. Uh, it's not just a person or people; it's an ideology. How do you defeat that?" And if I'm in a group where that is accepted, then we have to start looking for diplomatic solutions, because militarily we're not going to be able to achieve what we want to accomplish.
Right.
So what I do is I don't allow that kind of thinking to proceed. I politically say, no, that Hamas is in the person of somebody. Therefore, by killing this person or isolating this leadership limit, we can achieve victory. And that's what I believe the Israelis have done. They've security assessments through politicization, so that they truly believe, the leadership, that by killing Sinwar, you will destroy Hamas. And this is why they released that video, because they wanted to show that he was dead. What they didn't realize is that they were doing exactly what the reality of Hamas is. He is now a martyr. See, Hamas, the way they're organized, they embrace martyrdom. And this Sinwar is a man who has been challenging the Israelis to kill him. He says, I am a dead man. They can kill me whenever they want. And, he wasn't in a tunnel surrounded by hostages.
No.
Based on what Hamas has said, he'd actually been in the streets for 18 consecutive days, leading his forces in combat
Wow.
against the Israelis.
Just wow.
So this man, um, you know, and the irony is here that while when he was alive, um, he was less effective for Hamas than when he's dead.
Wow.
Because now being dead, um,
He's
you
iconic.
can never change this. He is a martyr.
Yeah.
He is a motivator. He will never go away. It's like saying that, this is an extreme, but, George Washington is the founding father of America, is more motivating today through the history books than he probably was at the time that he was alive. Um, because the myth that we create is far more effective. Again, I could get in a lot of trouble for this, but I'm going to say it anyways. Martin Luther King has proven to be extremely motivating today in terms of his words, etc. I think he has a greater impact today than he had when he was alive. When he was alive, he was a human being. When he was alive, he was limited by being a human being. He was a great human being, but he was limited. But in his death, he becomes so much more. And I think that's Sinwar. Sinwar in his death has become so much more than what he was when he was alive.
I was thinking of the guy that did the slave rebellion. I can't think of his name. It was the black man. He rebelled.
Oh, in the United States or
Yeah,
in Haiti?
in the United States, he killed
Yeah,
hundreds
yeah, yeah.
of whites. He's, considered today as, what he did is considered to be okay in the context of what he did it in. They don't consider it to be a negative thing looking back on history at it, even though at the time, you know, clearly killing 100 of some people at one time is not
No,
necessarily going to be.
Nat Turner.
Nat Turner, thank you, Nat Turner.
Yeah, Nat Turner.
One,
No, I was just reading about Nat Turner the other day.
yeah,
And it's the same thing. At the time, he was reviled. It was, but today, looking back on it, you realize that it was the only course available, given the oppression that was taking place, and it looked in retrospect. And yeah, I mean,
I see it through a
the
very
lesson of
similar
Nat Turner
lens. Yeah,
resonates far more today than it did at the time that it happened. Yeah.
yeah, I see it through a similar lens. Scott, I have to let you go, but 30 seconds. Regardless of what Israel thinks, are they winning in reality?
No, Israel. I mean, this is, and there's more Israelis starting to wake up to this. First of all, not only is Israel not winning, they're losing badly. War is an extension of politics by other means. That's Karl von Clausewitz said that in his classic book on war. Sun Tzu, if you read The Art of War, makes similar statements. So everybody who looks at the Israeli conflict with Hamas, Hezbollah, and now Iran from a purely military perspective is missing the point. The military is just one aspect of this of this struggle. Uh, the big aspects you have to look at are economy, society, and politics. And when I say society, it's both domestic and international from a geopolitical standpoint. Israel is not only losing, I believe Israel is fatally wounded, that Israel will not survive this conflict. Now, their demise may not come militarily, because again, that's the wrong thing to focus on. Hamas certainly cannot defeat Israel and occupy Israel. Hezbollah certainly cannot defeat Israel and occupy Israel. Iran can destroy Israel, but they can't occupy Israel. Um, what, but just like the Israelis focus on and saying, if I get rid of this, then this system will collapse. If we kill Ali Khamenei, Iran will collapse. If we kill Nasrallah, Hezbollah will collapse. If we kill it's not Netanyahu. So killing Netanyahu isn't going to achieve anything. What keeps Israel alive is the fantasy of the land of milk and honey. It's not just a Jewish homeland. It's because a Jewish homeland where you have to live in constant strife is not going to be a homeland that can sustain millions. In order to attract millions of people to Israel, it has to be the land of milk and honey. Right now, Israel's economy is shot. $67 billion hit last year economically. It's going to be worse this year. Their second largest port of Eilat has declared bankruptcy. No shipping's coming in. Tourism is down 90%. 90%. Israel was, of course, the Holy Land. Everybody went there for tourism. It's gone. 60,000 displaced up north, probably going to become 100,000 because rather than returning settlers to the north, Hezbollah's shelling is causing more settlers to flee. The poison pill here now is that the world recognizes that the solution to this crisis when the time comes must include a Palestinian state. Must include, not may include, not could include, must include, which means that no matter what, Israel will have to engage in a two-state solution model, which is the death of them, because part of the two-state solution will be the dismantlement of the West Bank settlements. Prior to October 7th, the Israeli president said because of the internal conflict in Israel that Israel is in danger of civil war. And now we have a situation where, and civil war is shooting, not civil conflict, etc. Now we have a situation, if they try to dismantle the West Bank settlements, there will be a civil war. Israel will not survive that which has started. I believe that in the end, Israel will self-destruct, meaning that millions of Israelis will flee Israel. The demographics will be unsustainable for a Jewish homeland, and eventually the only solution that works will be the one that people embrace, which is a single-state solution called Palestine. But Israel, I believe, is fatally wounded. They've wounded themselves by engaging in this conflict.
Scott, man, always appreciate you joining me. Scott Ritter, former UN Weapons Inspector of Mass Destruction. You can find Scott Ritter, there we are, if I can pull this up. You can find Scott Ritter on Telegram at Scott Ritter. Ritter, man, always appreciate you. Look, guys, I'm going to take a quick commercial break. You guys are listening to the Jamarl Thomas Morning Show. Back in a moment. Scott, man, thank you for this. I really appreciate it. I'm going to let you go and kill this meeting. You have a good evening today. Have a good one.
All right, thanks. You too.
Bye-bye. Bye. All right. Welcome back to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. I hope you guys are doing all right this morning. Wherever you are listening to the show, give it a like, share the content. You can support this content through PayPal, Patreon, or for that matter, through Super Chats. Whatever Super Chat I get, I will try to read it. I'm going to be at the helm, 7 a.m. to 10 a.m., Monday through Friday. I've decided to take the best of the radio show and the best of my show and create the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. Yesterday was the first episode. I was massively unsatisfied with that first episode. The guests were great. Technology was not. It was not necessarily the most proficient in the world. And as I said, over the course of the week, this is going to get more crisp. I'm doing it all. I have to control several working knobs that's taking place at the same time that I'm doing the show, doing commentary and everything else. I'm arranging guests simultaneously, so my job has gotten far more voluminous over the course of this last week as everything gets situated. So I'm glad that you can join me. If you can only support the work through a like, give that like. But any little bit helps to keep this show ticking along, considering it is what I'm doing for a living now, going forward, for the foreseeable future. So I want to go to the next spot. Garland Nixon and Scotty are going to be joining me at 9 o'clock and 9:30. But before I get to that, I want to piggyback on the conversation we were having with Scott. Scott pointed out that not only is Israel not winning, they are strategically losing. And I know if you're living in America, or if you may be in, let's say, Europe, that may be a shocking assessment. But that's a shocking assessment because what they're looking at is the number of people that they can kill, not necessarily the military objectives they need to accomplish. And those two things are not always the same thing. When the United States went to war with Vietnam, we went over there, we were able to kill, 3 million Vietnamese? We lost that war. We lost that war because at the end of the day, Vietnam was always going to stay in Vietnam, and Americans were at some point always going to have to go home. It wasn't about the number of people that you were trying to kill. The military objectives that you were trying to accomplish were different. My argument is something very similar here. Israel has made a choice. Now, I would argue a settler colonial state is doing exactly what a settler colonial state does. It is occupying a territory. It is expanding in the context of that territory. In order to expand in a territory where you don't belong, you have to expel or exterminate the domestic and the local population. That is what we did in America. We expanded. We went from one side of the country all the way to the other side of the country. We cleared out anybody that was in our way. We created laws in order to criminalize those people. And we looked at ourselves and saw ourselves in a particular light, despite the fact that we were slaughtering people en masse. I'm saying the key difference now is the religious fervor that's associated with it, the bathing in the Holocaust as a way of shielding itself from any blame and responsibility that's taking place today. If there were cameras back then, I would wager to you that it would look a lot like what is taking place in Gaza and Lebanon and the West Bank right now, with the same level of fascistic fervor that is within the context of the Israeli public. It's not just Netanyahu. The public fundamentally agrees with what he is doing. To make the point more plain, Israel has decided that the objective is extermination or expulsion. And in the context of that, meaning for Gaza and for southern Lebanon. And when they make this argument of, well, there was a terrorist in that apartment building, so we had to destroy the entire apartment building to get the one guy killing 100. Do you think they're doing it by accident? Or do you think they're doing it by policy? When they're sending people on these long marches, 20% of the people need to move overnight. 50% of the people need to move overnight. They're not, and they're doing that in Gaza. Why do you think they're doing that? It is not an issue of self-defense at that point. It is an issue of expulsion, revenge, and extermination. They want to be able to occupy those land masses. Netanyahu wants to create greater Israel, and just so happened that there are people living, had the unfortunate distinction of living in those areas that Israel wants to take. This right here is Lebanon. They're blowing up financial districts, claiming that the financial districts are giving money to Hezbollah. These are community banks that they're blowing up. On top of that, Israel has come out saying that there is a terrorist base hiding under a hospital. Now, this is pretty astonishing because, as we were pointing out with Al Shifa Hospital, Israel kept saying, we didn't do it, we didn't do it, we didn't do it. And then they said, well, there's a terrorist base under that hospital also, in which case there were explosions hitting that hospital. They have been on a tear, hitting anything that's standing up with impunity, with the U.S. giving a blank check for them to do it. The death of Yahya Sinwar, as I pointed out in that clip, they played this for the public. From their point of view, look at him. We killed their leader. This will be completely demoralizing. In reality, what people saw was a leader out in public leading his troops, apparently, and with his last breath, flinging a stick, meaning his last breath on this earth was spent in defiance of an occupation of an apartheid state and of an open-air ghetto, and resistance to that. Now, we may, in this country, consider him a terrorist, but understand, Yahya Sinwar didn't just come out of nowhere. He was created, meaning he was the monster, this brutal monster that Israel created, that Israel fed through mistreatment, through theft of land, through rape of its people. Don't take my word for it. You can look at this point at UN reports saying systemic rape, forced starvation. Antony Blinken lied to Congress about Israel intentionally starving the population centers. Right here. This is the latest pronouncement that is coming out. Israel announced that it will strike civilian infrastructure through Lebanon, accusing it of funding Hezbollah. IDF spokesman Hagari, quote, this evening we will strike significant economic targets that are used to finance Hezbollah terrorist activities. We call on anyone in Lebanon and Beirut near such targets to evacuate immediately. Again, these are just civilians. My point, I don't want to get the point lost. They seem to be making an argument that murder indiscriminately is the point, and they're trying to use it to accomplish political objectives. A document was sent. Israel handed over the document to the United States on principles of arrangement, and I need to find that document. Basically, what the document is Israel's, what they're willing to accept for some kind of peace deal. Now, this has been described as effectively a surrender document, and it's being described as a surrender document for what Israel wants in order to, I guess what they would say, cut down on hostilities. Right here. So this right here. Yes, it's in a different language. I'm going to translate. Israel delivered to the United States last week a document on principles for a diplomatic solution that would end the war and allow displaced citizens on both sides of the border to return homes. 4 senior American Israeli officials told me, this is the gentleman, Walla News, the details and the article below. Now, when you go into the article, there's some wording that is rather astonishing. So right here, the Prime Minister office forwarded the document to White House, and I will pull this up just so you can see what I am talking about as I read it. All right. Okay. So, all right. So right here, the Prime Minister's office forwarded the document to the White House ahead of the IDF soldier, Israeli U.S. dual citizen, and President Biden's envoy, Amos Hochstein, to Beirut today. Israel demands that the IDF be allowed to carry out active enforcement, quote unquote, in Lebanese territory to ensure that Hezbollah does not rebuild military infrastructure near the border. This is a bill of surrender. And it also, by the way, and I'm saying bill, but it's not a bill, but this is a surrender document. It's effectively saying we want the right to occupy your territory and carry out enforcement mechanisms over the course of our occupation. And if you don't do that, we will just continue to level apartment buildings, to level financial districts, to level hospitals, to level schools, to murder journalists, to murder innocent women and children, to attack indiscriminately this country. That is the ultimate point. Allow us to occupy that territory, and we will stop this killing. Yes, we will occupy. Yes, we will kill people in the context of that occupation. But hey, you don't, at the very least, don't have to worry about scenes like this. Now, you could say that you give a document like this when you're winning, and that because they think they're winning, they believe they have a hand, they can say, we want your unconditional surrender. We want you to now sign on a dotted line allowing the occupation of your country. The other aspect of this is that the bombings are intended to try to create a sectarian division among factions in the area, meaning in Lebanon, with this thought that one faction may attack another faction because they are sick of the bombing and they're blaming Hezbollah for that bombing. Okay, well, that's not happening. The reality of it is you are killing people across the board, which creates a certain amount of unity within the context of the country. The same thing is true for Hamas, by the way. Yahya Sinwar is going to be considered a hero, despite anything that the U.S. is saying in the context of resistance fighters and groups in that region of the world. He would be considered a hero. It's not that everybody loves Hezbollah, or for that matter, everyone loves Hamas. What they don't like is being terrorized by Israel. And anything that's showing opposition to that will, by definition, get support, whether they like the politics of it or not, which is what they're going to have to deal with. I guess my point is this. It explains the policy of this indiscriminate killing. Because again, indiscriminate killing is not necessarily a military objective. Indiscriminate killing is just indiscriminate killing. There's a secondary thing to that about whether or not you can accomplish your goals. And if you look at it from a larger context, the number of people that are leaving Israel, the political strife that's taking place in the context of the country, the missiles that continuously fall on the north, or for that matter of Israel, this expected strike against Iran that is going to be met with an overwhelming strike from Iran, this notion of deterrence and vulnerability being instantiated when beforehand Israel was seen as being unhittable. If you think about it, in the very beginning, Iran wouldn't even hit Israel, playing with the United States to show force. Well, this will be the third show. This is not a playing around game anymore. And truth of the matter is, Israel, despite the fact they're giving this surrender document, is not necessarily in the best of places in this moment, nor will they be after the strike with Iran. I think Ritter is right. They may have a policy of indiscriminate killing with the idea of trying to get some kind of political concessions from that indiscriminate killing of women and children. I don't think they're going to get it. I strongly suspect this is dead on arrival. You guys are listening to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. I'll be back in a moment. Welcome back to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. My name is Jamal Thomas. I hope you guys are enjoying the show wherever you're listening to it, whether you're in the mornings, whether you're at work, whether you're at home. I hope you guys are digging what I am putting down. And I am joined, there he is. I can hear you, the one and only Garland Nixon. How you doing, man?
Check my settings.
Can you hear me okay?
Settings.
Can you hear me all right?
There we go.
Okay.
Here now.
Yeah, man. Welcome to the show, man. How you doing today?
Wonderful, wonderful. Thanks for inviting me.
No, I thank you for coming. I always appreciate you coming. Look, I told the audience, I am in amazing debt to you for bringing me on to Fault Lines as a guest, and bringing me onto the network. You have my deepest appreciation, and you'll have it forever on that. So I really appreciate it. Thank you for that. And thank you for joining me on the show. Let me give you a proper introduction just so everybody knows who you are. I would imagine that everyone already knows who you are, but let's be official about it. I'm joined by Garland Nixon. Garland Nixon was a Sputnik political analyst, co-host of the Critical Hour, and a friend of the show. Thank you for joining me, man. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about that I am fascinated by, and maybe I shouldn't be fascinated by it, but I'm fascinated by it. This notion of the more Kamala Harris talks, the less she's liked. Meaning, there's this weird phenomena over the past month where you've seen a noticeable slide in her polling. I believe the NBC News poll had her at 47, Donald Trump 41. The month before that, 47, 46. The month before that, Harris was up by 6 points in that same poll. If you're looking at the polling that's coming out recently, the majority of the swing states, Donald Trump is winning. You're seeing a movement towards Trump, even if it's small. You're talking about a small movement in a race that for the most part was fundamentally even. And this seems to be taking place on the national races and in the domestic races. And Harris does not seem to have an answer for why this is taking place. And frankly, if you talk to Democrats in general, they don't have an answer for why. I have my own assessment for this, but why do you think that she is fundamentally sliding in the polling despite trying to do more appearances and everything else? What do you think the reason is that she's sliding in the polls?
Well, I'll start by tooting my own horn a little bit. This is exactly what I predicted. My exact words. I said, the more they see her, the less they like her. And the reason is because history is a good precedent, and it's something, while it doesn't always, it's not always a perfect predictor, at least it's always a good reference point, right? And what happened in 2020, she came out, again, she's an attractive woman, she's a woman of color, all of the, the woke stuff and everything else. But when you listen to her, she's a very poor candidate. She's one of the worst politicians I've ever seen in my life. So it was obvious to me, the more they see her, we go from the concept and the narrative of Kamala Harris to, it's kind of like, and I've had this instance where someone said, oh man, this is a great restaurant. I remember this one restaurant I was in, Rehoboth Beach, and I was riding by it, and it looked awesome. The ambiance, the color, and they had water, nautical stuff, and I'm like, oh man, I bet they got good seafood there. And I went, it was terrible, horrible. So I had to eat food. Then everything went downhill. And I think that's Kamala Harris. They built a narrative around her. They built everything about her. But in reality, when you listen to her, I keep going back to this. She's the black Sarah Palin. And the reason I've always said that is to be a good politician, one of the things you have to be able to do is not answer questions. When someone says,
Not
hey,
answer them elegantly. Not answer them elegantly.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
A good politician, you ask them a question and they can give you something that doesn't answer the questions at all, but it appears to answer the question and it sounds smart. And afterwards you feel fulfilled. Well, that's not, but that seems like a pretty smart answer. And you walk away. And I think people also intuitively understand that very early in the answer, they're like, well, I know this politician isn't going to answer this question, but let me hear what they say anyway. I also I think that it's not oftentimes that she's not skilled at that. It's that she can't answer questions when she wants to. She doesn't seem to have the concept of, they ask me what time it is, that means 3:45 p.m. They ask me what time it is. Let me just wander and talk about how bad Donald Trump is and why he's never on time. It's almost like fingernails on a chalkboard. You're like, my God,
It is.
get to something that sounds like the answer.
It's aggravating.
And it's always no.
Because she would bring up, well, I was raised in a middle class family. Donald Trump is horrible. Anytime you bring up anything about her or you ask her a question, well, Donald Trump is this and Donald Trump is that, it is bizarre. In fact, I think, for one, I think you're right. Two, I want to narrow it down to something specific. And I think it boils down to one main point. I mean, there could be other ones, but a key point. 80% of the public wants something different. Meaning, if you look at polling, one poll I think has like 64%. No, the other one that Brett Baer showed had 80% or 79%. Meaning, very clear. We want something different. We believe the country is on the wrong track. When Kamala Harris is confronted with this, and they ask her, okay, America wants something different. What will you do different? And her response is this.
Bringing the allies together. Is bringing the allies together.
Wait, I'm sorry. Her response is this.
How risky is it that you could lose the election?
You were asked on 2 different shows last week what, if anything, you would do differently than President Biden. Here's what you said.
Would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had impact.
Under a Harris administration, what would the major changes be and what would stay the same?
Sure. Well, I mean, I'm obviously not Joe Biden.
I noticed.
And so that would be one change in terms of, but also I think it's important to say with, 28 days to go, I'm not Donald Trump.
So,
Garland,
you're not Joe Biden.
the audience can see it. I hope you could hear it though. Basically, she said, "I'm not Joe Biden. I'm not Donald Trump," and that was her answer. And when you get 80% of the public saying they want something different, that is massively unsatisfying.
Yeah, and so what we get is this, because now let me add one other thing. One of the things that she just said was the vice president is involved, I've been involved in all the decisions that Joe Biden makes, right? But also recently she said, well, the vice president really doesn't have a part in all these decisions, right? So, you get contradictory answers. And I think here's the bottom line. What people hear is no answer. That's what people hear. Like, you don't have an answer to that. Like, come on. Every time somebody asks you that question, you say something about Donald Trump one time. The next time you say you're an intricate part of all the decisions when it benefits you for that particular question. Another time, the vice president doesn't have anything. So what you have is a rambling person. Again, she doesn't have an answer. Whatever comes to mind, well, person. She always looks like a person who's fallen in the water and they're drowning and they're reaching in all directions to grab anything they can to pull themselves out of the water. Desperation. And I think people...
No, please. I'm just laughing. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think people have figured out that there's nothing there, that she is nothing but a conduit for power. That's all she is. That if she gets in, that I don't think anybody expects change. Another thing is I think it has exposed the vacuousness of neoliberalism, the vacuousness of the current Democratic Party, who, as Hillary said, you got to have a, what she say, a public
face and a background face. That's right.
And I think people realize whatever you guys are planning under the scenes, you ain't going to tell us. You're just going to stick somebody out there and say, okay, vote for this black woman. And then something's going to happen, but we don't really know what. And the number one driver, I believe, and this is what I hear in the black community, prices.
Yeah.
They got kids to feed. They got bills to pay. And they're like, what are you going to do about the price of eggs? Donald Trump.
When you look at
too many eggs, you're going to get cholesterol.
When you look at the polling and they ask who's better on the economy, it comes up Trump. Who's better on inflation? It comes up Trump. I don't think that's, I don't think those things are separate and distinct. Again, 80% of the country said it's going in the wrong direction. Well, why? I would imagine inflation plays into, I can't afford my bills. These things are so expensive. Housing is so expensive. And you're giving all of these people all of this money. Simultaneously with, well, I'm just going to be just like Joe Biden. And I can't really think of anything that I would change from Joe Biden. That is a killer. And if you spend 2 months going from pillar to post telling people that, and that's the answer that you have, and that's the answer that's being replicated, well, yeah, it's not necessarily shocking that if the country wants something different and you're telling them you're going to be the same, that you're going to start to slide in the polls. I think those things are pretty straightforward. It's weird to me that her campaign was so lazy to not come up with an actual answer for that question. It is, look, man, it is. And by the way, it's not like Trump is running a great campaign. Trump has been completely incoherent. He has been inconsistent on pretty much anything. He barely answers any of these attacks. He may say Liz Cheney is a warmonger. Kamala Harris is hanging with Liz Cheney as warmonger. And that's the other thing I want to get to. The demoralizing effect of having Kamala Harris running around the country with Liz Cheney. Just astonishing. And by the way, not even a real town hall. So if you remember, I think it was last night, they were having a quote unquote town hall. When they started that town hall, they started it with the following, and I hope this is loud enough for you to hear. With the moderator, apparently, I don't know who asked the moderator, but the moderator comes out and effectively says that the questions are predetermined and that hopefully they will ask something that you may want to hear.
You're not, unfortunately. We have some predetermined questions, and hopefully I'll be able to ask some of the questions that might be in your head. I hope.
Think about that. It's a town hall where you're supposed to, get it from the town. They're like, hey, don't get excited. You're not going to get any questions that you may want. But hey, maybe one of these scripted questions would be something that you want to hear. And she sits there with Liz Cheney and goes, I think, 3 different states, hanging out with this warmonger. How is that not demoralizing to the Democratic Party?
Absolutely. But I think it reflects where the Democratic Party is now, what they've become. I've been saying for a while, the Democratic Party of 2024 is, in fact, the Republican Party of 2005 and 2006.
Agreed.
Right? Also, the discussion about Kamala being really a surrogate or even maybe an avatar for Hillary Clinton. I went to the 2016 convention. I covered that convention for Pacifica and Fox News and stuff like that in 2016. And I couldn't believe my eyes when I was watching. It was neocons marching all over the place. They had some crazy general up there who, book. This guy gave the speech. He's like, our enemies will fear us. I'm like, oh my God, what the hell? This is, So bottom line is, this is exactly the Hillary Clinton 2016 convention with a worse candidate and a really far, even the people who are handling, these advertisements. They've had this one about men where it kind of looks like the guys from the YMCA. I'm a man and I like to do this stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, if those guys aren't clandestinely gay, I don't care, but come on, let's just be open about it. And then another one they have about black men. And it's like kind of implies, have you seen that one that like, if you're black, you can't get a date unless you vote for her? It's craziness. They're like asking these women, trying to talk to these women. And I'm like, so all you've got to think of black men are these creatures, dogs in heat that are chasing after what, that's the way it comes across. Like,
or druggies.
Women for a date. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm like, come on, you're kind of legitimizing the political abilities and acumen of black men. Like, they don't vote based on, real things. It's like, hey, vote for me and you'll get the babe. It's almost like those advertisements where they have some hot babe advertising a drone or something, figuring all the guys they won't even look at the drone. They'll just like automatically buy it, right? And you look at that and you're like, the level of incompetence around her matches the level of incompetence of the candidate itself.
Yeah.
And the more I look at it, and again, Donald Trump, you don't have to do nothing, but get out of the way. Donald Trump just has to be the person that when people look at this cringe over here and they're like, oh, this is, and there's somebody else over there that's just like, hey, I'm not her. Okay.
Yeah. That's
fair enough.
That's what it seems like, because it's not like he's doing anything. Like, again, he is running a poor campaign. Well, yeah, he's out. That's right. He's out at McDonald's.
The hilarious thing about that, the funniest thing about that, it was one thing. I've heard people that don't even like Donald Trump say, well, at least he's funny, right?
Yeah.
The hilarious thing about that was when they first started this and they're showing him how to make the fries. And Trump says, I went to the doctor and he checked my blood pressure. He says, I've never seen blood pressure like that. I'm like, that's Trump. His blood pressure is so great, the doctors have never seen, I don't know, 130/85 or whatever the hell it is.
Can
And I'm like,
you imagine
that's so Trump.
being that guy that drives up and Trump sticks his head out of the window? Here's your fries. Here's your bag. Um, Look, as a PR stunt, it's a good idea, right? He's mocking Harris about working at McDonald's. Like, I'm the only one in this campaign who's worked at McDonald's, and here's me, Donald Trump. He got publicity for it, and good publicity. It's one of those 1940s political stunts, right? Where the guy used to walk out and talk to the public and stand behind the thing and eat donuts and hot dogs in order to deal with the public. Yeah, there's a political grandstanding to it that just works. It's his good political
Can
instincts.
let me add this.
Yeah.
Also, something it does. The imagery is this. It shows Trump, right? And then he's like talking to the manager, like just talking to people fries. The imagery is this, kind of neoliberal, arrogant, you know, elitist versus a guy with a bag of fries in his hand. The imagery, forget everything that's said, is he appears more like even though he's a rich guy and he's not. I put it like this. If you ask anybody, like as I always say, my dad was a longshoreman, wore a hard hat and went to work, with boots, steel-toed shoes, one of those kind of guys, right? You ask a guy like that, who would you rather sit down and hang out with and have a conversation with? Donald Trump or Kamala Harris? They're always going to say Donald Trump because he can speak their language, and Harris can't. I think all of these things put together, this thing could be a landslide. You know what I mean? Michigan is going south. Pennsylvania is going south. All these things are going south. If Kamala Harris, if you wake up early and she loses Michigan, which I think she will, and she loses Pennsylvania, which she thinks she will.
Michigan is close, and Pennsylvania is close. Yeah, she could lose
and you
both.
Know what else? There's Trump always out. If you say you vote for Trump, no, I'll never vote for Trump, but kind of secretly, when they go in, they're going to tick that. There's always a certain percentage of people that do that with Trump, but not with Harris, with the Democratic candidate. So I think he gets probably 1 or 2% just from that.
Yeah, I can't say. Yeah, I agree with you on this, and more to the point for that, right? If you remember back in 2016, there was a lot of people who didn't acknowledge that they were voting for Trump, which skewed the polling in a particular direction. I mean, I think the belief is that Democrats have to be 5 points up in order to be able to win. And she's not 5 points up. Not just not 5 points up, she's underwater in many of these states. I mean, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania used to be one of those states that Republicans wanted but could never get. And now Pennsylvania has become a swing state. And again, if she loses Pennsylvania, she loses this race. Like, it has to be magnificently uncomfortable. And by the way, in lieu of that, Bob Woodworth has come out the woodwork. And Woodworth has, of course, he's being deployed right now that the election is close. And he comes out and says this. I'm going to play this clip. I hope you can hear it. This is Bob Woodworth talking about Trump.
And I discussed this with Coates several months ago. He said, is this blackmail? In other words, is Trump being blackmailed?
I mean, that is wild. I don't think that has really sunk in for the public yet, that his own director of national intelligence suspects he might be getting blackmailed. It's not a Democrat. It's not.
Now, what he's talking about is that he believes that Donald Trump is being blackmailed by Vladimir Putin. They have gone back. They couldn't find anything else, and they went digging in the box. And Bob Woodworth, shamefully, runs out with this nonsense that Donald Trump is somehow being blackmailed. This didn't work the first time in 2016. They've had an investigation that went on for years. It all failed. What the hell do they expect to get from this?
Don't you always get the feeling with this administration and its hangers-on that they only talk to themselves in their own circles?
Yes.
And when they're like, we're going to come up with a plan to end the Ukraine war, and you can listen to their plan, and you're like, well, amongst all of you guys and the neocons, it sounds like a great plan, but the Russians will never. And everybody goes like, the Russians will never accept that.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? Like their plans are always them getting together and saying, what do we want to happen?
And usually it's a bad
great,
idea.
let's go.
It's like we are going to destroy the Russian economy and we are going to destroy the Russian military. And they're confident and they run in confident and then they get crushed and they're shocked by the whole enterprise. Oh, why didn't this work?
And when you listen to Kamala on Fox, right? Inside the TDS, Trump Derangement Syndrome people, the answer to every question is Trump is evil. Hey, what time is it? Trump is evil. You know what I mean? That's the answer to every question. So she went on there. I would be willing to bet that Kamala and all of her hangers-on, her entourage, when she got off of Fox News, they said, you did fantastic. Every question they asked.
There's no way.
Trump.
Oh, there's no way.
High-fiving, we won that. And I think that's what's happening. They're like, okay, guys, things are tough. We need a plan. What do you think? Oh, this one can't fail. Here's what we're going to do. We'll say Trump is being blackmailed by Vladimir Putin. And whoever said it, they all looked up and they said, my God, man, you're a genius. You had me at Trump and Putin, and they high-fived and they hugged and they went forward with this plan that couldn't possibly fail. Because it is, do you remember something? When her book came out, Donna Brazile said, I tried to get through to the Clinton people, and it was a cult. Remember that?
Yeah.
Brazile said you couldn't get through them.
Yep.
It was like a cult. It ain't like a cult. It
is a cult. Yeah.
And in the cult, they simply say things that within, and we've all been around people like that or groups like that within their groups, there's certain thing you can say that everybody in the group will think it's great. And if you're outside of the group, you look at them like, did they really, what the hell are they doing?
Yeah.
I think that's where we are. And so
I've had that experience.
Bag of tricks for the most effective thing. The only thing they find is the most effective thing for those who are already supporting them. And they'll go, yay, sorry, I don't care how fired up you are, you're not going to get but one vote. You can vote, excitedly in favor of Kamala, but that only gives you one. And I think, again, it shows their weaknesses, their the insular myopic nature of this cult, blue cult.
I agree with you. I mean, like, I remember I was around this guy, and the guy said something like, well, Trump is obviously working with the Russians. I was like, why do you think that? And he's like, well, and it's always a mealy-mouth response. It's never like, here's the evidence for this. But the catch is, when he's talking to his other Democrats, it's just gone as a foregone conclusion. There's no challenge to it. He probably was never asked, what do you mean by that? He probably was never even asked that question. Before we let you go, we have a few minutes. Her running around the country with Liz Cheney, I'm fascinated by that. Because Dick Cheney was the biggest warmonger, or one of the biggest that we've had in this country. Dick Cheney was famous. He would go to the New York Times. He would give an anonymous story to the New York Times. Then he would go out and reference the anonymous story that he gave as if the New York Times is putting out news. Like, just horrible, cherry-picking information in his own area, basically using that as dummy intelligence in order to get the country into Iraq war, end up killing 1 million Iraqis and furthering into multiple countries with the objective of going to Iran. He was a lunatic. Liz Cheney is cut in the same vein of that lunatic. And I would wager that the issue and the reason that Kamala Harris and Liz Cheney are dovetailing is on issues of foreign policy. Like you said, she's a vessel for this kind of Hillary Clinton wing of the foreign policy that Liz Cheney, the Mitt Romneys of the world want to remain intact, that they are threatened or they believe that Trump may in some way dismantle. Do you think she gets the bang for the buck that she thinks she gets by catering and advertising herself with Liz Cheney? I think it demoralizes the Democratic Party. What are your thoughts? We have about 2 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you 100%. It makes them look like fools. But again, what's it get back to? They truly believe, I think two things. Trump, this derangement syndrome. They believe that they can stick her out and make the argument out there, make the argument. Trump is so bad, even the Republicans won't go with him. So they think they get a TDS point out of that. The other part of it is, from their perspective, I mean, she has an advertisement out with John Bolton and whatever his name is, Mark Esper. Have you seen the
Oh,
advertisement?
I haven't seen that.
Bolton
That is
and
astonishing.
Esper
Wow.
and Pence. She's great. Bottom line, that's who they are. That's the hand they're playing. And if that's a winning hand, well, then congratulations, they won. I got a feeling that ain't a winning hand, but it's who they are. So you can't ask them to do anything else. They're simply revealing, they're pulling back the curtain. When it comes back down to it, guys, we're really John Bolton, which again, that's Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
Hillary Clinton is John Bolton.
Yeah.
And she truly believes Clinton's people are behind her saying, let's run with this. I swear, maybe it didn't work last time, but the Russians stole it from us. This time it's got to work.
Garland Nixon, political consultant, analyst. Garland, just so that everyone would know, what do you do? I mean, you were at the radio station with me at the network. What are you doing going forward, and where can people find you?
People can find me on my YouTube show. They can find me on Rumble and Rockfin. And it's similar to you. I feel somebody asked me about that what's going to happen to all of our hosts. And I said, look, number one, there'll probably be other opportunities in radio. Number two, all of our hosts were really activists who happened to get on the radio and had things to say, where people were kind of philosophers to some extent, which means we ain't going to stop doing what we're doing because it's who we are. And that's it is. This is who I am. This is who you are. So I'm going to continue on YouTube. And
just what I'm saying. So we're clear. Once you left the station, you didn't have this change of point of view, change of opinion. It didn't just happen overnight when you left the station. You were actually a real American that had points of views that just diverged from the narrative.
Well, I still do have a show. It's an unpaid show on Pacifica.
I remember that show. You brought me on that one time.
89.3 WPFW.
Garland Nixon.
Yeah. And the bottom line is this. I continue to do this thing. Yeah. I'll just finish by saying this. I was saying the same thing on there that I was saying on Sputnik. So, but I don't get the daily call from Putin with our talking points now.
Garland Nixon, man, thank you for this. I really appreciate you joining us, Garland. All right, guys, I'm going to take a quick break. We're going to come back in a moment. Thanks, man. I really appreciate you, Garland. You have a good one.
I look forward to being on, regularly, and I'll get with you. I really have taken a couple days to kind of unwind, and I'm just starting today. I'm going to send out emails to a lot of our guests, email and just say, hey, the show's over, but I've got some other platforms I'd like to enter, and I'm going to ask them, when are some times that you'd be available so I can start. I want to do something similar to you and go back to a lot of our guests and do a lot of the same stuff that we're doing.
Yeah.
So,
man,
it's going to work.
You have a good one. You have a good one, and I'll hit you a bit later. Thank you for this.
All right, talk to you soon, brother.
Have a good one. Bye-bye. Welcome back. My name is Jamarl Thomas from the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. I hope you guys are doing all right. I am waiting for my next guest to join me. Yeah, it's a bit inelegant. I'm trying to find a way to make this a bit more, I don't know, crisp. When you're doing all of it, there's so many moving parts. But again, I will get better at dealing with the moving parts. I hope you guys are doing all right this morning. Like I said, my name is Jamal Thomas. This is Jamal Thomas Morning Show. Go from 7 to 10 a.m. Monday through Friday. You can catch me right here at this channel. Definitely join me. How you can support the content, by the way, by giving a like, and of course, by giving through Patreon or PayPal or Super Chats. And it looks like our guest is joining us. We have the one and only Scotty Nell Hughes. Scotty Nell Hughes. She's a veteran political commentator and currently, or was, the host of 360 or The Perspective on RT. And of course, she's in the same boat that I'm in. Oh, there you are. Can you hear me okay?
Hi.
How are you doing this morning?
I am here considering I did not know we were the most powerful voices in politics. Did you know that?
We apparently we were. The U.S. government took time out of its day to shut our networks down. So clearly we had to, have some sort of voice that was so subversive.
Well, no, we're so powerful. We can control an election.
Yeah.
I'm so happy for that. I wish my bank account reflected it.
That's what they keep telling us. I mean, you and I are effectively in the same boat. It is a weird feeling, and you've been in this boat twice. I've been in this boat once. It is a bizarre feeling to be sitting on a plane. I was taking a flight. I was on vacation going to Malaysia, and as I was sitting in the airport, I see Blinken come on TV saying they are passing sanctions against the network I work for and the network you work for. And sitting there thinking to myself, wait a minute, the US government is out to get me? They're eliminating my job? And what I'm doing is just reporting the news and giving context to the news? That is astonishing. And I remember sitting there thinking to myself, okay, well, what does this mean? And two, we have a First Amendment in this country that they seem to be completely blowing past and going around. I was astonished by it. I still am somewhat bewildered by it. Give me your take on this, because they did this to RT once before where RT folded up, and then eventually it reorganized itself, and then they did it once again. Give me your take on this.
So the fact that we think that we have freedom of speech and freedom of the press here in the United States is such a joke right now. But the people who can actually personally attest that it doesn't exist, we're having to stay silent. I can say it here with you because you're another person of it. But this is true. I was always told everybody has to have a villain. It's easy to villainize Russia. Russia, in fact, likes to be villainized to a certain extent because it means that they obviously have an impact in the world. And I think we would know that besides just nuclear bombs, but it obviously shows they have an impact on society. So from their perspective, they don't usually help themselves in trying to repair their image. So therefore, it's real easy to villainize them. What gets me about this one is that the ones like myself, like yourself, we could probably all unite because there's actually a larger group than just R2, as I'm finding out. There are more online news outlets that have been affected by these sanctions, but they're like you and I. And what they've done is they've trained us over the past 2 years, especially this past year, when you have FBI agents knocking on people's personal doors. And you and I both know that one of someone who worked for RT was physically beat up by FBI agents. That's not a headline. We can't go out and say those things because I don't want the FBI knocking on my door. And unfortunately, you find out we don't live in a system that you are innocent until proven guilty. They automatically come in. And we have the media that is backing them up. They could come in and you could just be sitting there and they could say that you were
doing anything.
Defending yourself. And oh my gosh, I do have a gun in a safe downstairs, but I was ready to, I was violent. Like you don't get a chance to tell the truth or your side of the story in America today. And so we're sitting here being quiet, which is really sad on it, because we can't tell the people, American people, the average American, because if they're doing it to us, and literally all we're doing is like you said, telling the news, but more importantly, we're also giving opinions. And I keep saying this. If people would have actually watched RT America before it was gone, if people would watch even the work that you and I were doing, it was more balanced than
Yes.
work we were doing. It was truly the left. It was the left. It was the right. It was the libertarians. It was everybody, and it was respectful. And that was the conversation the Americans say they want to have. But I told somebody as I was on my walk this morning, it's like you're asking the wolf to change the rules of the hen house it built. And they're not going to do it. So we're kind of just sitting here quietly waiting for this election to happen. And because, like I said, you go and make any squeak, you draw any attention to yourself, they're the U.S. federal government, and they can do a lot more damage to you than you can ever do to them.
I mean, look, the reality of it is this notion of quote unquote Russian propaganda, and you have opinions that literally span the gambit on the network. We've had people who are pro NATO on the show. We've had arguments with those people. We've had people who are pro Israel. We've had people who are against it. We've had people, I mean, it literally ran the gambit in regards to points of view. Of course, as human beings, we're going to have our own take, but we bring those people on in order to have those conversations and even at times those arguments. That is far more balanced than what you would get on a mainstream media outlet. And I'd argue far more pro American. And what I mean by that is if you're saying, look, I don't want this country to be in a third world war, I don't see the point. I don't see how it benefits us. Okay, that is an American first point of view. When you make this argument of, I don't think what we're doing in the Middle East is productive, and we shouldn't be having a war over there. We need to stop sending these weapons and deal with a peace plan. Okay, again, that is what is in America's best interest in that conversation. And honestly, that is typically my take. I thought Donald Trump's notion of America First was fantastic casting. Whether he lived up to it or not is secondary to the point. But that notion, that thought of what is in our vested interest as a country first and foremost, and then extending it out in way that you're dealing with the rest of the world and deal with them honestly, for God's sake. I don't see that on mainstream media. It's usually pro-war. How many people can we kill? It usually gives a pass to things that we're doing in the world with this kind of double standard. And those things are, I would argue, cancerous to any notion of having a united world, especially if you want one that is somewhat peaceful. No, I agree with you on this. It's a shame. I want to talk about the election, though. And I am fascinated by this notion that the more Kamala
Harris... The election goes together with all of this.
It does.
The election.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think part of this is narrative management, right? This idea that there's a narrative that we want to be able to maintain. We want to maintain this on several fronts. Kamala Harris being one, Ukraine being one, Israel being one, et cetera, et cetera. And it looks like she is having a hard go of it. And if you look at the recent polling in the battleground states, she seems to be suffering in those states. And you can see a trend where Donald Trump seems to be, let's say, advancing, either leading or lessening whatever he's losing. Basically, in the battleground states, he seemed to be winning more states than losing. In the national polling, especially in the most recent polls that came out, he seems to be winning. Nate Silver has given him an edge in regards to most likely or the chances to winning the race. This is different than a month ago. Whereas a month ago, Harris seems to have somewhat of a modest lead that has changed. What is it? Like, if you had to put your finger on it, onto why, what changed? There were no debates. There was nothing that took place. And yet, she started to edge away in the polling. Her leading starts to ebb away to the point where Donald Trump, in most polls in Philadelphia or Pennsylvania, he's winning. Give me your take. What's going on? What changed?
So what changed was, we have to remember, Donald Trump has been campaigning since 2020, probably even since 2019, since 2015. Okay, he has never stopped campaigning. And when he had stopped campaigning, it was because he was probably in a courtroom somewhere and facing a was the only break that he got. I mean, the man's not taking a vacation, a nap, or his time on the golf course. He still has people like Elon Musk, in the golf cart next to him. He's working. He is tirelessly. Why Kamala Harris saw the bump, and I always said that it was because not only was she the people after 4 years of watching the campaign, but especially after the past year, they wanted something new. I think the American heart, especially in July, was going, maybe we're going to get a breath of fresh air, something new, especially the Democrats having been under Joe Biden the last, year, watching him campaign. It was Kamala Harris in name, but it was really Democrats wanting to have a chance because I think they saw going into it they could not run on the record of the last 3 years. That chance did not last longer than November. Now, maybe if they would have replaced Joe, if they maybe would have waited till August, end of August, September, that might have even been a better strategy because that bump would have happened right before early voting happened. They just did it a month too early because people then got to see has been able to see who Kamala Harris is. Once again, I always go back to look how a person treats their staff. When you had 92% of her vice presidential staff had resigned within the first year based on how they were treated, that just shows how presentable and how they're going to treat the country. And that you cannot hide that for very long. And so people are getting to see who Kamala Harris is. That doesn't mean that I think the Democrat Party is weaker. I just think that they've picked a bad candidate. Now, some might say this was done on purpose. They knew they were already going to lose, and they did not want to go on and potentially sacrifice a Gavin Newsom or a Pete Buttigieg or one of their others because people, the Democrat Party did not like Kamala Harris going into 2020. They definitely have kept her quiet the last 3 years. She was kind of like a last-ditch effort. They don't like Tim Walz. They didn't want to sacrifice Shapiro, who they feel like could be a potential future leader in their party. So I don't think this means that the Democrat Party is weak. I think it's the exact opposite. I think they actually played some strategy here, knowing they were going to lose, and only replaced Joe because they were worried about the down ballot races. Those are also starting to look kind of rough. You have the senator, longstanding senator since 2000, that he's standing on Trump's immigration policy, that he supports Trump's immigration policy. That's how bad we're getting. But you have to admit, Trump, as much as the media is trying to spin it as being staged, I can't believe Donald Trump going and working at McDonald's for that time period was probably one of the greatest political
Agreed.
stunts, whatever you want to call it, in history because it literally appealed to every age group. And the fact that he genuinely got in there and did that, I think was going to be it pretty much secured the race for him. Now, here I think is the problem that we have is that you still are happen. And while we've all been distracted here in America with this campaign, this election, you and I both know because of our coverage, it is boiling over in Middle East. And there is nothing more than the neocons on the Republican side and nothing more the Democrats would like to see than a worldwide conflict erupt right now. And we are just right there. And I am only my biggest concern right now is I hope that diplomacy is already in action and telling everybody to just stop and hold their place. A new administration or an old administration is coming back in. And I feel like if we can just prevent World War III from breaking out in the next 2 months, that is a huge victory because unfortunately we're fighting our own government on this. Let me just say this, Jamarl, to your point. I love this country. I do believe that the people of America, just like other countries, are amazing. Their heart, their soul, they're good. They make mistakes, but they want what is best for their family. I think we are very much a society filled with love. I think it is our government that is not. And I think it is that our government is the ones that falsely represent us to the rest of the world of what America is supposed to be like. So I will defend this country. I will defend the people of this country until my last breath in my body. I will not defend the actions of this government, both in the past and the present, especially as they currently stand, because unfortunately, I think they are giving the rest of the world a very bad impression of who America is and what our actual intentions are, and what the people are in the world. We used to be someone that you meet American. It was great when you traveled. Oh my gosh, you're an American and it's a beautiful thing. Now it's not so beautiful.
Look, I agree with everything that has just come out of your mouth on that. And I guess there are 2 points to break down. I thoroughly agree with this premise that the country wanted something different. If you remember, Brett Baer asked Kamala Harris, or pointed out 80% of the country wants something different, meaning they want a new direction. Harris and her campaign argued, well, I am a new generation of politician. Okay, fair enough. But then Brett Baer also pointed out to her this. I want to play this clip.
You were asked on 2 different shows last week what, if anything, you would do differently than President Biden. Here's what you said.
Would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had impact.
Under a Harris administration, what would the major changes be, and what would stay the same?
Sure. Well, I mean, I'm obviously not Joe Biden.
I know.
And so that would be one change in terms of, but also I think it's important to say with, 28.
And of course, she's going to say, I'm not Donald Trump either. So 80% of the country wants something different. Harris goes from pillar to post telling people, what's different between you and Joe Biden? Well, I'm not Joe Biden and I'm not Donald Trump. Is there anything different than you would have done than Joe Biden? No. How does a public that clearly thought she was a breath of fresh air, that thought, well, she's black, she's a woman, she has mixed heritage, well, by definition, she's something different, and they were willing to give her a certain amount of support and even hope that she would be that difference. And then she goes out and tells people, no, don't get it twisted. I don't plan for anything to change. I think that is a killer point of view and a killer perspective, meaning from the standpoint of her campaign. And I think part of the reason she was ebbing away like this in regards to her polling is exactly what you said. The public wanted something different, and she has presented herself and revealed herself to be the same old, same old. As for the war stuff, I agree with you on that. Whether it's in Ukraine, we are dancing, whistling past the graveyard on that stuff. If Joe Biden would have went and said, okay, you can use weapons to hit Russia, we're in the middle of a third world war. And even right now, Israel has nukes. They have nukes. They don't like to acknowledge them, but if you notice in the leaked document that recently came out that was in Middle East Eye, the document points out that they didn't believe that Israel would use nuclear weapons. But think about what that means. That means that the analysis had to consider whether or not this was a situation where they would use nuclear weapons against Iran. With our backing, by the way, that is astonishing. And when I was talking to Scott Ritter earlier, Scott Ritter made the point that the attack that they seem to be planning may be a stalking horse to create a justification for a nuclear strike, meaning you do a hit, it's insufficient to really do any main damage. Iran has an overwhelming strike, in which case now you scream, okay, now we can use nuclear weapons. Like, this stuff is very dangerous. And honestly, this is the world that the Democratic Party under Joe Biden has allowed. And so when Joe Biden goes out and says, I have done great on foreign policy, and yet the world is in chaos. And even when you see Kamala Harris, like she was with Liz Cheney last night, attacking Donald Trump for foreign policy, where he's like, I want to end these wars. She's attacking him for that. That's astonishing. But that point of view is the orthodox point of view, whereas Donald Trump's point of view is more to the point of we need to stop these wars. At the very least with Russia, he has made contradictory statements on stopping the war in Israel. But either way, even for the context of just the war in Ukraine, his point of view is we need to stop it. Her point of view and the point of view of the orthodoxy is this is perfectly fine. We can keep these things going on. It's appalling. I agree with you. I totally agree with you.
Well, and I think that the difference is when you look at it with Kamala Harris, and this would have been a better tactic if I was her. It says, I'm not Joe Biden, but my policies, my alignment is more like Barack Obama's, especially with the Democrat Party. I think that that name would still, and now President Obama hasn't really identified with Kamala.
Right.
But I think that if you look between who's more popular, Joe Biden or Barack Obama, especially with the Democratic Party,
obviously
it's going
Obama.
to be
Yeah.
Barack Obama. She said, you know what? I actually consult with Barack Obama often, former President Obama often on policies. And I would like to see us return back to how we were, the policies, foreign policies that.
But see, therein lies the rub. Biden is still there.
Right.
Yeah, that's the rub.
But the majority of Democrats would see that as a positive. They go, great, that because they short-term memory, I guess. They forget, but they don't want what Joe Biden's done. And I think that would have been a more successful strategy for her, was to align herself, because like I said, it
Yeah, it tracks better.
hated George W. Bush and now he's our hero. They seem to forget what it was like underneath them. So Barack Obama, I think the Democratic Party, if she would have aligned moving forward on the foreign policy side, here's what I think we really need, why we're playing with fire. We don't know. Take what happened when we dropped the first 2 nuclear bombs. We are in a different world than even then. We don't know a post-nuclear war. You open up that Pandora's box, and it is a whole new ball game for our entire world that unlike anything we've ever seen before. That is that option. It truly is a nuclear option, because it will totally change every element of daily life with that fear and the results of it. And I think that is why people like Donald Trump say that shouldn't even be on the table in any form. Because, by the way, I know the EU and Europe thinks that they're so great, they would lose. I know America thinks that potentially, but when the majority of our nukes are in countries that at this point are not our allies, that we're not necessarily going, probably not a smart strategy. Just ask the South how that worked out for them during the Civil War, when they sat there and countered a war when they didn't have the artillery within their own boundaries. Just some real stupid, common sense mistakes being made by the federal government right now. And I have to wonder, are we really smart, or are we really dumb because we keep putting them back into power?
One of the things that I'm interested in getting your take on from the right, this notion of Kamala Harris siding with Bush Republicans, Liz Cheney, Dick Cheney, John Bolton, and running around the country with these people, using them, I don't know, to try to get votes, I suppose, for disaffected Republicans. Is this going to work? Are there enough Republicans that are on the fence that are willing to vote for Kamala? And keep in mind, I want you to take on something else. I strongly believe that these Republicans want their party back, quote unquote. And they believe that if they side with the Democrats, Kamala Harris specifically, and they can beat Trump, then they can somehow regain the Republican Party. Do you think that'll work?
No. And it's hard to say that. I don't think the Republican Party is necessarily a conservative party anymore. We have this ideological debate in my house all the time. But those people that Liz Cheney and I think we had Liz Cheney. Who's the other one that was campaigning with Kamala Harris?
Dick Cheney, John Bolton.
No, it was one of the other daughters. McCain. No, even Meghan McCain's come out for Trump. And we're not going to vote for Trump anyways. Anybody they'd appeal to was never going to vote for Trump anyways. They were either going to stay home or they were going to vote for Kamala Harris. They were just, they're so never Trumpers, they're set in it. Here's where the Republican Party is, though. If we were to go back to that, then we would lose, because that's what we did in 2008. That's what we did in 2012. When you take the party to the moderate middle, as it stands right now, the Republicans lose every single time. And even if we win, as in the case like with Mitch McConnell, we still lose. So that doesn't work. When people start screaming about a third party, they want something, or they want a revolution. They want something more in the RFK, Tulsi Gabbard type development. They don't want a more moderate Republican Party. They want a full-out libertarian, to a certain extent, I say common sense libertarian, the party that people like RFK, even Chris Cuomo, Tulsi Gabbard, Tucker Carlson, that they're talking about. And that's the kind of party that those are where those disenfranchised Republicans want to go.
Yeah, and on some level, disenfranchised Democrats also. Because keep in mind, RFK is a Democrat. He's a classical Democrat in real terms. I think his position on Israel is screwed up. I don't think it's contradictory from my point of view. You can't argue, I'm an anti-war candidate. We need to stop these wars. We need to understand our enemies. And then you get to the Middle East, and he's like, Israel can do whatever it wants. Okay, these are contradictory statements. I think it damages his campaign by a lot of people who might have voted for him that decided to either stay home or vote for Joe Stein. Or for that matter, grudgingly vote for a Harris. But taking that issue out of it, I agree with you. He's competent. He has the capability of explaining issues in a substantive way, in a way that you don't really see from many other candidates. And on some level, if he was on the debate stage, I think he would have done exceedingly well. on that debate stage. But again, they kept him off the debate stage. And there's this question of how do you gain traction if you can't get on the debate stage in order to try to gain traction, right? Um, I'm curious on the other front. If Trump loses, what does the Republican Party become if he loses?
Well, it depends. You cannot look at what's going shop in the Bronx in New York, or you have even more thousands lined up in Philadelphia to go to a McDonald's because he's there. At this point, I think even the Democrats can concede. And you look at the crowds that Kamala Harris is having or Tim Walz is drawing, that if by chance on election night, unless if everything stays as it is, if we don't have any major things happen, if it looks like Trump lost, there's going to be a lot of questions. There's a lot of people that will be questioning how, because you cannot look at the overwhelming support across America and say that lost compared to what we saw in 2020. You can kind of get away with it because we weren't allowed to meet. We weren't allowed to be together. You weren't able to see these huge crowds. We were in parking lots, and it wasn't time to time. This is happening in places where there should not be any support for Trump. There's never been supports. Could you imagine Mitt Romney going into a barbershop in the Bronx? Could you imagine how bad of a PR nightmare that would have been in 2012?
Yeah.
These people aren't being bussed in. These are organic grassroots. So let's just say on election night, if Trump loses, you're going to have a very disenfranchised, very upset, very questioning, doubting, organic grassroots movement in America. In 2008, that produced the Tea Party. I don't know what it would produce, but I guarantee it would produce a unifying movement that would either have to be dealt with in a negative way by the U.S. government because they would be very doubtful. But you would definitely have, it would not go away. If anything, it's going to just create a monster and a beast because it would just add to any of the frustrations that most Americans feel right now.
But the Liz Cheneys and the Mitt Romneys of the world, they're not getting their party back in the way that they think, like this kind of 80s Jeb Bush Republicanism.
They're gone. That's done. The Bushes are done. That doesn't mean that we don't have our own issues within the Republican Party under Trump, that we don't have our own issues of grifters and personal ideologies. I mean, you definitely have to be very careful right now and where you're going with it. But let's just say that think about a world under Elon Musk, where Elon Musk is mainly in. It's mind blowing. Now, there could be some positives. There's going to be some major positives, but there could be that's a lot of power.
Yes.
And we know how Elon Musk, what he does with power. Go ask the former employees of Twitter.
Yes.
So, there's also some heart palpitations to this as well. Getting rid of the Department of Education. It is, on one hand, I completely agree with it. But on the other hand, I understand how important our school system is. And it's not just something that you can just,
Yes.
lollygag along. There's got to be a structure and there's got to be a foundation for it. So saying that you're going to wipe out an entire Department of Education, that might not be necessarily the best approach.
By the way, do you believe him on that? I mean, look, I find that to be disastrous. I even find this notion that billionaires are coming out of the shadows to get their hands directly on the levers of power is terrifying to me. Any way you want to look at it, right? You give $75 billion or $75 million or $100 million to a political candidate, and he bestows upon you all of this power in the organization. You're just buying your way in. That's disturbing to me in any context. But do you believe that they would do stuff like get rid of the Department of Education? Like that they would actually, because look, the reason I asked that, Joe Biden said, we're going to legalize marijuana. We're going to push for a $15 an hour minimum wage. We're going to et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And didn't do any of those things. Didn't even try in real terms. Do you believe they're true believers? Or they're just saying things to get elected? And this could be the last question. Give me your take.
Well, here's the thing. Do I believe? I think, I hope, let me say this, I hope that what they would do is return it back to the state. I would hope that what Trump will do in the best, and this is across the board, not just the Department of Education, because you really can't get rid of the Department of Education. You would throw this country into chaos. But what you do need to do is grant that power back to the states. I will tell you, I've got a child right now. I wish I could show you my kitchen table. I am covered in college applications. And I think this is where the majority of Americans are feeling right now, that applying I'm huge in pro trade schools. I think trade schools,
Yeah, trade schools.
the college, if you are a combined household making over $80,000 a year, which that's barely minimum. I mean, that sounds like a lot, but it's really not, especially for a family of four.
In DC, it's not a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, 80. You couldn't do DC. Definitely not do DC. I lived there part time, and that was $80,000 a year. $80,000 is a family combined income. If you make over 80,000, all the way up to $400,000, or not, I'm sorry, 80 to $200,000, you cannot get any federal aid.
Wow.
It is mind blowing.
Wow.
For my kid to go to college, I was like, my husband and I, we just need to quit our jobs. Because in that range there, if you make over a certain amount, guess what? You have enough money to write the check to the university itself. That I don't care about them, but they're talking about the true middle class. Even making $150,000 to $200,000 a family of four in America today, you're still struggling.
That's not much for a family of four. Yeah.
Those are the things that need the reforms that need to happen. And the reason why the prices are so high is because the government got involved. I think he's going to pull the government out, or I hope he pulls the government out of a lot of these institutions, including health. Healthcare is another mess we could get into, where I do believe that the government has helped and hurt the issue of healthcare today. We could go on.
You and I are going to greatly disagree on both of those. It's not that look, I guess from my point of view, if you're talking about other countries in the world, especially let's say in something like Europe, they have an advantage over us, either in healthcare and education, because they fundamentally cover healthcare and education. And so you can go into, let's say, one of those countries and then come into the US, you got a free education, and now you're taking a job, educated job, that somebody else in that country, in this country could have taken if we were willing to fund education. Like, if you think about the things that you want to incentivize. So we put a tax on tobacco. We put a tax on alcohol because we don't want people to do those things. We find those things to be a public nuisance, but they're legal. Forcing people to pay for their education is a tax on them doing that. Whereas I want education to be free. I want anybody that has the mental capabilities and the capabilities and skill to get an education to be able to get that education. I don't want money to be a hedge. And the reason I say that, it makes our country better. Think of the number of nurses, doctors, engineers that don't do that profession, that can't do that profession because they can't afford to pay $100,000 a year for a degree. I understand your point that by putting the money into the universities from the federal government, they've inflated the cost. They've created a certain inflation in regards to the cost of the universities. I totally get it. There has to be a better way. This seems to be counterproductive. And that's it.
It's to do with healthcare. There's got to be a better way. The difference is, I think you have to look at, is comparing the amount of people in America that are not paying into the system that don't help cover those costs. You're right. Someone from another country could come to the United States, and guess what? They're going to get most universities will cover their higher education cost. Someone coming from another country in here, that's why, we talk about the dreamers, all of those, guess what? Their costs get covered. You don't see that in other countries. I could not go to the UK and get my higher education costs covered unless I was a UK citizen.
Right. That's my point. If you were a citizen,
that's the difference.
If you're a citizen of those countries, you get covered, especially in healthcare. I mean, think of this notion that we're putting all of the money on healthcare on top of businesses. So a company that is doing XYZ now has to also cover their workers' health insurance to the tune of 50% or 100%, as opposed to being able to use that either in wages or in business expenses in and of itself. No, this is a can of worms. We totally get it too. Scott.
And I bet we agree. I actually believe in the end, we actually both agreed to it.
Yeah.
Healthcare, I do believe that the reason why the costs are so expensive in healthcare is because the hospitals know the government will pay the bill. So
in part,
without any questioning on it.
And they don't even show you the bill. You don't even get to see. You have a broken leg. Okay, well, we're going to do so and so and so and so, and you get the bill in 2 weeks. You don't even know how much it costs.
No, and that's like I said, and everybody's paying into the system. That is key. And it's not as large. So you can get away with things in Finland and even in France and Spain that you can't get away with the United States because not everybody here pays into the system the share that they should.
Well,
and that's where all of it is across the board, the conversation that we can have.
well, they have taxes. I mean, their taxes basically pay for the health care. So, you know.
Not go down to your local ER right now. I don't think very many people in there right now with a.
No, I mean abroad. Like if you're in the UK, or if you're in Spain, or if you're in Portugal, if you're in one of those countries, they pay through taxes as opposed to getting people with the direct expense. Scotty, always appreciate you. Veteran political consultant, journalist, Scotty Nail Hughes. Scotty, where can people find you today? Are you doing a show? What are you doing right now?
Who knows? I'm still, my Twitter feed has not been seized yet.
Well, that is
about,
positive.
I keep begging, well, I keep begging Elon Musk. I'm still on the old RT blacklist, so I'm definitely being squelched. We know, but who knows? So find me on Twitter at Scotty N. Hughes, and then I'm mostly right now on News Nation here domestically in the United States.
Well, Scotty Nell Hughes, thank you for this. I really appreciate you, Scotty.
Good to see your face.
It's good to see your face, too. You have a good one. All right. We have come to the end of the show. I hope you guys enjoyed it. The Jamarl Thomas Morning Show. Let me make sure I don't have any chats or anything like that. I want to keep my promise and trying to ensure that anytime somebody gives that I find it. All right. So guys, I want to thank all of you. I think we had a pretty decent show today. Not too many glitches, not too many screw-ups. The process will get more crisp the more the process is done. And I will be here Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. Your morning show. Hopefully, the best damn morning show. Dealing with news and politics and issues of culture. You guys have a fantastic day. A Jamarl Thomas Show. Signing off.